Hey, Figure One, what do you see right now?
I see a red apple on a plate in the center of the table, a drying rack with cups and a plate, and you standing nearby with your hand on the table.
Humanoid robots are having a moment. A decade or two ago, it was a struggle to get robots to walk, not to mention respond to spoken requests. Now, armed with advancements in artificial intelligence, a gaggle of companies are at work on these bipedal creations. Serial entrepreneur Brett Adcock founded robot maker Figure less than 2 years ago and has lured some of the biggest names in tech and AI as investors. Adcock is riding high on the progress that his 23-month-old robot startup has made so far, working out of converted warehouse offices in Sunnyvale, California. He took an indirect path to his current ultra-competitive pursuit. He grew up on a soybean farm in Moweaqua, Illinois, run by his parents before graduating from the University of Florida with a business degree in 2008. After he graduated from university, he worked on Wall Street and then founded 2 other startups. By August 2022, Adcock had 8 employees. Now it's up to 80 and growing, with employees joining from some of the top tech companies.
There are no commercially viable humanoid companies today that are in market making money. So I would say, at the surface level, we have to introduce a product into market that's never been done before. It's just a huge technical fee. It's a huge integration burden. There's a safety burden, there's a cost area, a focus. It's just extremely difficult thing, challenging business to be building. Along the way, we've had to go build a team from scratch. I probably spent the first year in a really cramped phone booth calling everybody in the world, trying to convince them to come over here. It's always hard trying to hire great people. I feel very confident and fortunate that we have some of the best engineers in the world here today.
It was very obvious even when I first met him. He moves fast. He is an organizer and is able to sort of collect incredible people and organize those teams. And he's highly commercial. And so he sees what needs to be done to truly bring these technologies to market.
In the past, robots have taken years to design and build, but Figure is all about speed.
At Figure, we believe getting to market faster is super healthy. From an engineering perspective, we have basically an iterative design approach to engineering, which means we spend less time on research and development and analyzing things. We spend more time on just building and testing products.
Very quickly became obvious to us that this was like backing Ford in 1903, where it's very rare to have a new technology that has no incumbents and is unregulated. And the reality is if this technology works, everything changes.
Artificial intelligence will be the backbone to basically everything we do that will help control the robot, to help observe the physical world, plan actions, do prediction.
In March 2024, Figure publicly released a video demonstrating its Figure One robot.
Based on the scene right now, where do you think the dishes in front of you go next?
The dishes on the table, like that plate and cup, are likely to go into the drying rack next.
Great, can you put them there?
Of course.
At a high level, the robot has so many different ways it can move.
Right.
Sitting there and writing code for every single thing it needs to do, like make coffee or do work in manufacturing.
That would take forever, right?
Forever. It's impossible to do. So we need a better way of doing that. We think that way is through AI training. So we have a whole AI team that works on how we train the robot to do useful work all day long in these unstructured environments.
Mm-hmm.
Figure has a 3D printer on site, and it makes things like printed circuit boards and improvements to the motors called actuators.
Here we are designing new generations of electric motors. These motors are used all throughout the robot to make it move around. There's an electric motor in here, very similar to what you'd have in an electric car. And then we have extra sensors and other things in here that you might not see, that we also design here in-house.
Naturally, I think a lot of people are still hesitant about the evolution of robots, especially humanoids.
The interesting thing here is our robot looks like a human, so we can gather human-like data for humans doing demonstrations of things. And if we can train our robot to do it, that's like the holy grail
Right.
for us. Robots interacting with humans is like a fundamental to our business. Like if we can't have robots interacting with humans every single day, it's going to be very limiting for a humanoid. We really need them to be able to talk to the robots as probably the main default user interface. We need to be able to interact next to them safely. We need to have the robots also safely integrated into a home, so we don't want them falling over, damaging things, hurting people. So safety is like core to our mission of being able to work next to humans every single day.
And of course, there's a fear that robots will take jobs away from humans.
It's very easy to run into concerns around a dystopian future of what a humanoid will be. But again, after our work, it just became obvious of how large the need is for these with the labor gap that's happening, not just in the US, but globally, where there's a few million jobs that humans don't want or they're not showing up to day to day. And it's very low hanging fruit to have a couple million of these robots out there doing jobs that we don't want to do.
If you walk into like a manufacturing or warehouse plant today, they're losing 50 to 150% turnover every single year. People just don't want to do these jobs where they walk 10 miles a day or they grab 50 items an hour, or they're next to things that are, getting spot welded and it's very unsafe. And we have 10 million jobs that are open in the US and nobody wants. And we also having a collapse in the amount of workers in the workforce. So there's this huge labor crisis that's going on that's really not well reported. And we want to go and help solve that. So I think it's going to be quite a long time before we're ever really taking people's jobs in a significant way. I think what we're really seeing is a labor crisis that we can go in and help with that void.
Robot workers may soon become a reality. Companies like BMW are exploring the possibility of putting Figure's robots into their factory line.
We've chosen to work with groups like BMW that are aligned with us on getting robots into market quicker and then scaling out as fast as we can. We hope to launch over the next 12 to 24 months in Spartanburg, South Carolina, which is their largest plant globally in terms of production volume. A lot of the work we're doing with them is revolved around work in the body shop with manufacturing, moving sheet metal, work in the warehouse logistics, moving bins and boxes and other type of tasks. There's thousands of those type of tasks that need to be automated at those facilities. We hope over the next 12 to 24 months, we're starting to have real robots in real facilities at our clients. This is one of these areas where like a lot of the folks here, myself, we've been dreaming about this for a long time, since I was a kid. Having a chance to come in here every day and work on a humanoid robot and actually integrate into the real world we're just super fortunate to be here, and we're working as hard as possible.
A lot has to happen before humanoid robots are an everyday thing at even factories around the country. One of them is figuring out the power issue. Figure's lithium-ion batteries last just 2 hours right now. And right now, their version of the robot still has a black cord dragging behind it that connects to a computer. The next version of its robot will carry its own computer and be cordless, I'm told. Can robots learn everything they need to do? That may take some time.
I think once we start seeing robots in the real world, doing everyday tasks, helping humans, doing real work every single day, it'll feel like 30 years of the future, 50 years of the future is pulled forward. It'll be pretty magical.
Billionaire investors of the internet era are now locked in a war of words and influence to determine whether AI's future will be one of concentrated safety or unfettered advancement. The stakes couldn't be higher. This debate is about how those tools will be applied moving forward in society. You have some of the most powerful people in the world, literal world leaders, the Pope of all people, paying attention to these folks coming out of Silicon Valley who have very different views. And so while these conversations are sometimes happening behind closed doors and not making it to the general public, I think it's very important for our audience to know that this debate is happening and that the direction of AI development is being fiercely fought ideologically right now.
I see AI as a really, really powerful tool that will enable a set of things that otherwise we wouldn't think of it as plausible.
Vinod Khosla is a legend in Silicon Valley and the wider tech community. He co-founded one of the most important computing companies of the 1980s into the 90s called Sun Microsystems. Since then, he's been an elder statesman in the tech community, and he was the first institutional investor in what was then a small AI company known as OpenAI. He sees AI as a great economic equalizer that can sort of raise up the developing world while also improving the health and daily lives of people in places like the US as well. We caught up with Vinod Khosla at Khosla Ventures office in Menlo Park to hear more.
It's possible now to build an AI doctor that would be free doctors, like a primary care physician for everybody. The same with teachers. We could have a free AI tutor for every child on the planet for the cost of computing, which, as you know, is very cheap and declining. That's true of generally most expertise over the next 10, 20 years will be essentially free, which is a fundamental restructuring of how we value expertise in society. Now, whether as a society we allow this to happen, that's up to each country by itself. I don't think that should be a concern, but it is a concern that people have when it comes to AI because it's so powerful.
How do we, as human beings, play this game to win, right? And by winning, it means we make our societies better, we take the things that we value, it's part of the reason we value middle-class society, like education and wisdom and compassion, and how do we become better in all these characteristics?
Vinod Khosla and Reid Hoffman are both key early investors in OpenAI in their own way, and they're both influential with sort of different spheres of the AI landscape. They agree on a lot of subjects, but not all. Reid Hoffman is an early member of the PayPal Mafia, the legendary group of Silicon Valley tech leaders, including folks like Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, and Max Levchin, who were members of PayPal when it was a startup in the early days of the dot-com era. And then he made a name for himself as the co-founder of LinkedIn, the well-known professional network that was acquired by Microsoft for over $20 billion. Reid has since been a key investor at a venture capital firm called Greylock, where he actually brought in OpenAI, and at that time it was a nonprofit with no business plan, so the firm actually didn't invest. But Reid invested early on through his foundation, and he's been involved with a number of other important AI companies. He also has stood out to us on our radar because he has done podcasts and books where he's used AI tools himself. He wrote a book using ChatGPT, and he has met with everyone from President Joe Biden to Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo to Rishi Sunak in the UK. He's had multiple breakfasts with French President Emmanuel Macron.
If one could say, I'm spending 110% of my time on AI, that would be somewhat accurate, just because the question around what does it mean for us, not just as investors, because we have this enormous focus on this at Greylock, but also from society impact. What does it mean for the future of work? What does it mean for how individuals navigate their lives? And it's something that I started a number of years ago when I had the fortune to be part of the founding team for OpenAI for how that was going to pull together. And it was AI, which has been described to be here a number of times, is now really here. And so what does it mean for us as human beings? Now, that humanist hat might surprise people as it really matters as an investor. And so it's the entire range. And so it goes everything from, co-founding a company, the first since LinkedIn, to, helping academic institutions or nonprofits, in addition of obviously governments, navigate this new world of how AI is transforming us.
Reid Hoffman calls himself an optimist. He actually says that he was a techno-optimist before Marc Andreessen was. And Reid believes that overall AI is going to have the same exciting impacts for society that someone like Vinod Khosla would. He thinks that it could lead to great breakthroughs for medicine, for education, for business as well. But Reid compares AI to an automobile that you are driving from Los Angeles to San Francisco. It's faster than before, it's cooler than before, you want to see what it can do, but at the same time, he believes in perhaps slowing down at corners, and for that, he means cutting-edge technology like these models from OpenAI that he thinks, at a certain level of proficiency could have security impact. For example, creating a bioweapon. Hoffman says for a lot of things, if they're relatively harmless use cases, you can put the genie back in the bottle. But if a model somehow allowed you to become a bioweapons expert and 100 million people got access to it, it would be very hard to put that genie back in the bottle. On the flip side, there's Marc Andreessen, the co-founder of Netscape, and Andreessen Horowitz, an influential venture capital firm. Marc believes that open source is the way to go. Andreessen believes that the market itself can sort of dictate what is safe, what is allowable here. You don't need new regulation and new rules especially at the level of these models themselves, to keep people safe, keep progress moving. In fact, Mark even wrote in an essay that anyone who tries to slow down AI development is basically murdering people because it is slowing down the life-saving potential of AI. It's important to note that almost everyone we talk to about AI, including all these Midas list investors, consider themselves optimists in some way about AI. Where they start to disagree is about how powerful these tools are, how dangerous they could be, and what kind of regulation or guardrails should be placed on them. In reporting this story, we went down to Washington, D.C. to a conference called the Hill and Valley Forum, where we saw Khosla and a bunch of other leaders from AI speak with lawmakers. What's so interesting about this is that you actually have lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, Republican and Democrat, trying to learn a lot about AI and decide what U.S. policy should be along these lines.
Perhaps the biggest nightmare is the looming new industrial revolution, the displacement of millions of workers.
Interesting. Should we have a license required for these tools?
We're going to have all kinds of misinformation.
What kind of an innovation is it going to be?
Are you considering protections for content generators and creators?
So there's clearly implications of AI in national security, whether it's surveillance through TikTok or through Huawei telecommunications equipment or just cyber warfare. Also things like drones weaponized by AI. So there's clearly a very large risk and race there. Even larger than that is the social impact of a race. If China wins the race, then they will get to convey economic benefits to many other parts of the world. That's why I think this race with China is so important, and we should be acknowledging it's a race and not trusting the process and not relying on things like treaties, etc.
If you're in a probability increasing of, I'll use the shorthand, a Terminator universe, you want to know that that's a probability increasing and you want to be doing things to decrease that probability. The thing of where it just accidentally happens, a la, the Terminator movie, is I think highly implausible. The mistake I think of this dialogue is that it's the robots are coming rather than the humans are coming with the robots. Like just as AI is a human amplifier of good people, it's also an amplifier of bad people. And so you have to have that navigation for how do we help as many good people, doctors, other things, and as few bad people, terrorists, rogue states, criminals. That's part of the reason why engaging in the conversations with the AI doomers is useful, because you're finding what would be the thing we'd be looking for if your science fiction example suddenly increased from low probability science fiction to something growing, and then how would we navigate that? Because again, I think we could navigate it. I'm sympathetic with the concern and not sympathetic with the process and the tools.
So Vinod believes that AI should be able to be developed largely ad hoc and freely, except with certain advanced models that should be regulated by the government. And he says that at the sort of cutting edge, what he calls frontier models, AI should be regulated and perhaps controlled so that you don't have these models getting shared into potential enemies of the US, such as China, North Korea, Iran. Reid Hoffman believes that these models should be protected and regulated so that you don't accidentally create the next COVID-19 or some sort of bioweapon that would affect millions of people. He sees these models as just becoming so frickin' powerful that we can't keep up with controlling them after we've released them. To hear the other point of view, we caught up with Bill Gurley, a former Midas lister who now lives in Texas.
It's remarkably interesting that the biggest doomers are the ones that have the biggest financial stakes and the biggest foundational model. Like if you were coming to me and saying, here's a panel of 15 academics who've got nothing in this, who all think this is what should happen, then it'd be a different conversation. But you have people, this is, Vinod will tell you, he's the earliest, largest investor in OpenAI. Once again, that's a pretty ironic name, as Elon has pointed out. But he's also, Vinod also it plays this card, which I really dislike, which is this vilification of China. The entrepreneurs in China are remarkable and very talented. And it's not as rocket science as you want to believe. There's already enough information out there for them to have their own open source models. And so if you pull up and say there's no open source here and you leave open source there, guess where it's going to be the most innovative, where you're going to have the most entrepreneurs, where you're going to have the most innovation? It's going to be over there. And we're going to have created this muddy, wasteland where entrepreneurs can't move around. The thing I would ask these people is, why do they have confidence that Washington would be good at regulating something this nascent? Like, why would they be effective? Like, the only rules that they want are the ones that they wrote. These models have been out there for a couple of years, and we haven't had massive, crimes. I mean, there's incidents, but there's incidents with every new technology that's come along. Crimes are still crimes. If I defraud you with AI, it's still illegal as it would have been if I'd have done it with a phishing scam before AI. And so why do we need new laws? Why do we need new agencies? Let's just use the laws that are on the book.
One thing that I really picked up on in reporting this story was that folks like Bill Gurley and Martin Casado felt a huge sense of urgency. This is the time to be talking about this stuff, according to them, which is kind of interesting because a lot of people agree that these AI tools are super early. We are seeing right now that Google's AI tools are, telling people to put glue on pizza. We're seeing OpenAI have all sorts of issues with its tools as well. This is an early technology with a lot of bumps, and outside the tech world, plenty of people think that these AI tools aren't that useful at all. So if it's such early days, why is it so important that we be having this debate right now? And a lot of the people we spoke to basically feel like this is the moment that we kind of dictate the conversation, that the tone that will affect the next few years is being set right now.
We are going to have policies here. Some of the policies may just be kind of clarifications or extensions of current policies. Some of the policies will be new policies. We're creating this revolutionary technology, not surprisingly, that will require some new thinking, some new balances of what balances between, citizens' interests and consumers' interests and, kind of industry interest and government interest, and how do you bring all those together? And that's part of what policy does, is to say, let's make sure that these are shaped in good ways. But I think it's very early, and anybody who thinks they know the right policy shape right now is either deluding themselves or deluding you. And so we have to learn it together, and that's the really important part.
Regulation is the friend of the incumbent. It's not time for the government to start picking winners. And one thing that your readers should be aware of is even Reed and Vinod are spending a ton of time in Washington, and they've put money in super PACs. I've spent 25 years in this business and not had to go kowtow to Washington to go placate, different senators and congressmen. And I think it'd just be a horrible step for the venture industry for this to be the first move when any new wave comes along, is for people to run and become friends with the government and try and lock in their winners. I think that's just a horrible precedent.
There'll be some refinement of policy and implementation of these laws, maybe some new legislation over time, but currently I think they're sufficient. That doesn't say we won't have litigation. We will have litigation because people have different points of view, but I do think we don't fundamentally need to restructure what needs to be done. There's a very optimistic future that's possible. I have a dozen forecasts about plausible tomorrows, and I'm pretty optimistic.
I think solar is really the future, and it's absolutely taking off. And most new energy is a solar installation, and we're only going to amplify that. If you can get rid of the nighttime thing, that's really the only thing holding it back.
You're with Ben Nowak, founder of Reflect Orbital. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
So, your company, satellites, solar energy. I have a 10-year-old son. He would love this. He loves space. He loves science. Explain to me what you guys do as if I'm a 10-year-old.
Yeah, we are putting mirrors in space to reflect sunlight onto solar farms after dark. So there's a shadow behind the Earth. Sunlight hits on this side, doesn't hit on this side. Our satellites are right here, so we can reflect the sunlight right down to those shadow regions.
So it's like having like a giant mirror and pushing it down into the earth.
Yeah, we capture the sunlight in space and bring it down to solar farms, large towns. If somebody needs some light, we can get it to them.
How big are these mirrors?
They're fairly small, just like about the size of a tennis court or something like that at first. Eventually, as we scale up, we launch more and more of them. And then you start making them larger and larger, and you kind of do it like that. But the way to think of it is we are trying to get as much area into space as possible, as much thin plastic reflective area into space as possible, and control it really well so we can get sunlight to the people who need it. And we're going to need a lot of it because there's actually a lot of people who want sunlight, especially when you start talking about gigantic billion-dollar solar farms.
Yes.
So we are going to put a lot of area into space.
So when they talk about tech, they always say hardware is hard. You're taking hardware and putting it in space. I can't even imagine how complex this is. Where did this idea come from?
Yeah, I've been thinking about energy for a really long time. I built like a small fusion reactor in high school.
Like nuclear fusion?
Yeah, a simple one. It didn't make energy, but it did fuse atoms together, deuterium atoms. So I made that in high school, made X-ray machines.
Where'd you get your material from?
The Nuclear Regulatory Commission approved it, and I bought it from Airgas. Once you get the right approval, you can buy it, pretty locally.
All right, interesting. Okay, so you're obsessed with energy.
Yeah, obsessed with energy. Built a lot of RC planes, all kinds of engineering projects in school. I was trying to make antimatter for a little while as well. Realized that was a little crazy, so I kind of took the normal path. Went to SpaceX, got an internship there my freshman year of college.
How do you make antimatter?
You make fluorine-18 first, and that emits positrons, and positrons are antimatter. So you can use those, and I was going to try to harvest them and get some energy from that. But you need a linear accelerator in order to do that, and large arrays of power. So I remember I was going to Brigham and Women's Hospital and talking to radiologists there, looking at their linear accelerators, thinking how I was going to copy them, and they all told me to not do that. And I took their advice, and I'm kind of glad I did.
Okay, you and I had very different hobbies, so
yeah.
That is fine. What were you doing before you started Reflect Orbital?
I was working at a company called Zipline. They deliver blood and medical products with drones in like Rwanda, Ghana, places like that. And they're bringing that to the US. So I was working there when I had the idea for this. It started off, I realized that solar energy was leading the world for a long time. Like solar is a great way to make power. You get free energy from the sun. It's a lot better than fossil fuels in that way until the sun goes down. Then it stops working. And then you need something else to come in and kind of fix it because you have that variability. And you can make the solar panels more efficient, but really the problem is you're not getting the fundamental resource, sunlight. And even if you have a solar panel in Germany, you move that to the Sahara Desert, it'll make 3 times more energy. That's just a huge difference because of the fundamental input resource, the sunlight. And I recognized that, and I was like, wow, sunlight is kind of everything with solar. It's not about the panels, it's not about how efficient they are or where they're built. It's all about the sunlight itself. And we need to get them more sunlight so that they can work at night. And I started looking at ways to move sunlight around on the Earth, because I saw this huge potential energy difference. And I realized the biggest potential energy difference is from space to the ground. It's kind of like a gigantic dam, where like the shadow of the Earth is, the biggest dam ever, holding back more energy than we could ever use. And all we have to do to access it is put some satellites up there and reflect some power down. And mirrors are really efficient for that. So the math works out quite well.
Well, this is a wild, literally a moonshot idea.
Yeah.
How did you go from having this idea that sounds like science fiction and then quitting your job and saying, I'm going to start a company to make this happen?
Yeah, I always knew there'd be a day that I'd start a company. So I've been training for it for a long time. I've gone through like hundreds of ideas before having this one, and I would chase them out, as far as I could go before they started seeming crazy or something like that. And I developed a really good taste for it. I also built a lot of projects.
Okay.
I worked at SpaceX, but I also did tons of projects outside of work just to kind of like build up my skills, build up my endurance.
What's your training? Are you a trained engineer?
Yeah, I have a mechanical engineering degree.
Okay.
But also I worked at SpaceX on Dragon 2 as an intern, did 2 internships there, and then worked at a couple startups after that.
Okay, so you have this idea to literally put giant mirrors in space. You have the idea, what's the next step from making that idea to actually becoming a company?
Yeah, so we raised some money.
Just on the idea alone?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, there was a lot of work that went into like the pitch deck and like making sure it was clean, and I did a lot of math. I did like several months to a year and a half of mathematics on my own, just basically alone in a very small garage. And eventually, it all started working out, and I could kind of prove that everything had a reason to exist. So we've raised $8.5 million so far. And that's enough to launch a couple satellites to space. We're launching our first one in June of next year.
Wow.
And it's going to be a fairly small one, like scaled down. It'll be a 10 by 10 satellite, a bit brighter than the moon. It'll last about as long as a solar eclipse. And we were, wondering if, we were originally planning on it just being an engineering display. So we could just use it to do calculations. We were going to do it with like, dozens of laboratories around the world and a couple of our potential solar farm customers. We're going to take measurements. And then you're like, what if we could serve a different market? Like we should see if people want to just use this for, whatever they want. It's something as a service, who else wants it? We made a quick video, got 55 million views in just a couple weeks, and we have 182,000 applications for our sunlight.
Wow.
As of just a couple weeks ago.
You're going to go in and raise $8 million with just a pitch deck in hand and an idea. What were you pitching? How did you sell these VCs on this?
It was a pitch deck. It was a bunch of math. It was like 50, 60 little prototypes. We also, that was across 2 rounds. So we also did a hot air balloon test with an 8-foot bite.
Yeah, I want to hear about this. Yeah, I'm going to hear about this, your proof of concept here.
Yeah, so we put an 8-foot by 8-foot Mylar mirror on the bottom of a hot air balloon and went out to the desert.
Like a hot air balloon that like tourists take? Or
Okay. Yeah, it was a huge mirror. Like 2 big pieces of plywood, like a ping pong ball table of mirror. And then we had it on an actuated robot arm, and we could reflect that down onto a mobile solar farm. And we actually reflected sunlight down and measured the power that we delivered to these solar panels. It was basically like 2,600x smaller scale than the satellites will be. So you can scale everything up by that amount, and it worked quite well. I mean, mirrors work. We didn't really need to prove that, but getting the Mylar surface to be actuated well and actually perform the measurement was.
How does your machine and satellites? How do they do the? I can imagine the complex calculations, the micro adjustments to A, you're hitting the sunlight, and B, you're taking like a magnifying glass and hitting a spot on the rotating Earth. Like, how does that all work?
Yeah, so the satellites themselves move in a similar way to a dirt biker. They'll rev the engine a little bit so the back wheel speeds up and that pitches them up, or they'll hit the brakes and that'll slow down the back wheel and that'll pitch the motorcycle forward. We kind of do the same thing. We just have wheels that spin up and we can rotate our satellites like this. The satellite itself is just a flat surface. So there's no focusing that the satellite is doing. It's just reflecting the light from the sun down onto the ground. It's about a 5-kilometer diameter spot on the ground. And then if you want that spot to be brighter, you just have like 2 satellites work together to provide the same brightness, or 10, 100, 1,000, however bright you want that spot to be. We can dim it and tailor it to whatever you want. And we can also move that around by just moving all the satellites.
How high, how strong is the sunlight?
It depends on how many satellites you have working together. So one satellite could be, one small satellite, like the first demo one, will be a little bit brighter than a full moon, which is pretty dim compared to sunlight.
Yeah.
But then, once you start adding a couple hundred together, you can, get to a fifth as bright as the sun, or even brighter than that.
So you'd have 100 satellites all focusing on one focal point?
I mean, it'll never be exact. Like, it's going to be many. Okay. It'll be dozens, hundreds, thousands, that kind of thing. But it's also, when you're talking numbers, it's really about the area that you have in space. So if you make the satellites bigger, it's less satellites. If you make the satellites smaller, it's more satellites. It just kind of depends on, what rocket we're launching on, what the avionics cost, and, a couple little trades like that.
Is this sunlight, this solar radiation, is it safe? Are you going to fry people?
You can't fry people. Well, I mean, you can if you launch it enough satellites, but we're not going to launch that many satellites.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how, if this is happening, is it gonna, if I'm on the ground, is it gonna light my, I've seen your, for solar farms, but I think you also said in your, kind of thinking blue sky, it's film production, or there's a Monday night football game, and instead of having all the lights, we can direct the sunlight. How far out are we from that? And also, if I'm living in that area, is it am I going to get sun pollution? Am I going to get light pollution? Is it going to seem like it's midday because your satellite's near my house? How does that work?
Yeah, so by the end of next year, we'll be able to simulate that for 4 minutes or so.
Okay.
The year after, it'll be like a half hour or something like that. And it will be mostly lit up on the ground. You're not going to see a beam coming down from space or anything like that. It's just going to be a nice little warm light, about what street lights provide. But it's going to be a lot higher up than street lights. So, my house has a street light outside the window, and it always glares in my window, and it's kind of annoying. Our satellite's going to be directly overhead, so it's going to be, actually quite nice. Wow. And just lighting up the whole area in very smooth general light. And it's not going to be spraying too much in the air. It's mostly just going on the ground. This is actually how you do dark sky safe lights, or if you're doing stadium lighting for a soccer field, you'll have shades on it, so it just points down. We're doing a similar thing. So it's actually, fairly good on light pollution. Mm-hmm. And then the light itself is just full spectrum of sunlight. So it's, one of the healthier forms of light that you can have. It's not like an LED where you have a ton of blue light, and then, that makes your melatonin receptors, it basically blocks the melatonin production.
Okay.
So our lights don't have as much of that as LEDs for the same comparative brightness.
Yeah, not like the blue light we have all around us.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah, this is hard to sleep with.
How do you make money? Or how are you going to make money?
Yeah, we just offer the service. So we kind of position ourselves as a natural resources company. So we're selling sunlight as a natural resource to people. And we have figured out how to produce that. We've also figured out how to bring that to people in a way that's super fast and easy. And realistically, there's no reason you can't just get it from your phone. Like you could just text us your latitude and longitude and we can send you some sunlight. It's only gonna be like a couple $100s an hour. That's about it. And we just need to know your coordinates and know that there's satellites flying overhead. So the first couple will be a little weird. You'll have to be doing something at the right time. So you have to kind of plan with us. But the year after that, it'll be basically anytime within this window of time you can use the service. And then as it gets more and more, it'll be every single night, just use it if you want to. And there'll be, bigger commercial customers, like entire cities will be able to sign up for it as well and be yeah, we're booking the next 10 years. And we can work with them to figure out if that makes sense. And then, just get them that sunlight every single day for 10 years.
How much is it going to cost to launch one of these satellites?
So the first satellite we're launching is going to be $430,000 to launch. Okay. It's just a little CubeSat guy. But then after that, you can package it onto the rockets in a lot better way, so you can get a lot more area into space for a lot cheaper. Mm-hmm. It's kind of starting off in the worst case, most expensive scenario, just to make sure the satellites work. Yeah. But then the goal is really just get as much mirror area into space as possible. And when you're filling a rocket with these things, you can design the satellites to fit in the rocket a bit better, and you can get a lot of area into space.
So your goal is to spend probably hundreds of millions of dollars to put these satellites in space, and then earn the money back through kind of sunlight as a service. You said subscription model, people pay you for the hour, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's a bit less than hundreds of millions of dollars. Okay. You can start bootstrapping it in the tens.
How many satellites do you want to have up there?
In the end?
Yeah.
We don't like talking numbers of satellites. We like talking about area. What we want to do is we want to make a difference in the US's energy mix or the global energy mix. You can't really get above 30% wind and solar without the grid becoming so unreliable that it's just not worth putting any more in. And we want that to change. We want solar to be more of humans' energy because the sun is just so good. It's just this infinite energy source. So we could bring that 30% up to 50 or 60%. That's really what we're shooting for. Wow. And that's the future I want to live in, where everything's powered by solar energy and it just kind of feels free to use and you're not burning fossil fuels anymore. And we can do that with the sun. The sun makes the sun in 1/5000th of a second makes more energy than humans have ever produced. So it's quite a good fuel source.
That is a stat. How many employees do you have?
Oh, we're just 7 full time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who makes your satellites?
We do. Yeah.
How you?
Almost all in house. We have a couple vendors for different parts, but we assemble everything. We're putting it together, and then we will phase out basically all of our suppliers.
It's all in hand.
Yeah.
And what do these satellites look like? I know there's a giant mirror.
Yeah, it's a little guy like this, and then the mirror deploys out of that.
Okay.
It's very similar to a solar sail vehicle. If you look that up, it's like tape measure booms, 4 tape measure booms, and then they pull out this thin reflective surface, like a potato chip bag. It's just shiny and then thin plastic. And you just pull it really tight and it gets super shiny and flat. Wow. We have a couple tricks to how we do that well. Because you want that spot to be really, really sharp so it just goes where you want it. But yeah, there's not that much to them. They're actually quite simple on the scale of satellites. They're much lighter than a Starlink satellite, which is SpaceX's telecom satellites. And they don't have the phaser antennas. They don't have to serve dozens of customers. It's just one satellite and we just have to move it around.
You were working at Zipline right before launching this company?
Yep.
What were you doing specifically for Zipline?
I was working as a mechanical engineer on the launcher system, which is how they launch planes into the air for Rwanda and Ghana.
Okay.
And then I met my co-founder there, Tristan.
Yeah, I've seen those videos. They're amazing.
Yeah.
When they shoot them off,
they're
dropping blood into it's insane.
Yeah.
What was the spark that made you say I'm going to leave Zipline and start this company? What was that moment?
The seed happened when I was watching a YouTube video on the problem of solar power in Africa. And the EU was looking at spending $40 billion to build a bunch of solar farms in the Sahara Desert and then ship the power to Europe. And I was just blown away by the value of that. It's worth $40 billion to bring energy from this place of high sunlight to low sunlight. And it immediately just clicked in my brain oh, this is one of the biggest gradients I've ever seen. Because throughout my life, I've done calculations on what if you take all the mountains and get energy from lowering them into the oceans, okay, that would power humanity for 200 years. Or what if you slowed the moon down, and slowed the earth down and made a moon turbine, how much energy would that produce? How long could that power humanity? I've done all these calculations.
Again, you and I have very different hobbies.
Yeah, and I missed this one. I didn't see this one. I didn't see the sunlight gradient. And once I saw it, I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And I like just stayed up till 4 a.m. for like weeks doing math. And I was originally trying to move sunlight around in vacuum tubes. I was like, I'll move the sunlight from the Sahara Desert to Europe in vacuum tubes. And it was like, $30 billion, which is still insane. And but it was just the idea of moving the sunlight around. And then I realized like, wait, moving sunlight from space to the ground is so much more leveraged. There's so much more energy availability. You don't have the nighttime thing, and you can serve places that do have the nighttime problem. So just the difference in value was insane. And then, I had the experience from SpaceX, so I like had the confidence to just, I was like, I can build a satellite. It's not gonna be that hard. Just figured everything out, started doing all the math, and it works quite well. With all the solar farms that we already have on Earth, it's already like economical. We can beat the price of batteries fairly easily. And then all these other markets started developing. So there's obviously serving towns, all around the world, like Scandinavia in the winter, that kind of thing, all the wedding proposals, all that kind of like more niche stuff. But then there's like construction projects.
What do you mean wedding proposals?
Yeah, we got a lot of applications for people who want to propose to their spouse.
Under the sunlight?
Yeah, because you could flick the satellite on. It's like, I want to propose to the light of my life with big light from space.
What about clouds?
Yeah, clouds are in the way sometimes. So you got to pick the right day when it's not super cloudy out. Look, for us, it's not so bad because we can move the spotlight around within a couple 100-kilometer area. But if it's not the right day in your time, we can just schedule for in the next 1 or 2 days, something like that.
Does this affect the ecosystem? Like, are you heating up the Earth more?
It affects an incredibly small piece of the ecosystem. And it's also not that much energy. It's just basically just hitting the solar farms themselves. And when you do the calculation out of the energy added by our system versus the energy added by fossil fuels, they're like, we add a little bit more just direct heat, but the really important thing with fossil fuels is how much CO2 you're releasing in the atmosphere. We release almost no CO2, it's just the rocket launch, and that breaks even quite quickly. But then the long-term effects of having that CO2 in the atmosphere forever, of the just burning fossil fuels, is so much worse than what we're doing. It's way more total heat added.
Gotcha. You're obviously an expert in energy, expert in green tech. We hear there's so much hype around green tech right now, so much greenwashing, all these different ideas, so much people on the spectrum saying kill all fossil fuel now versus go off fossil fuel. Where do you see, what kind of technology and systems in place that are really going to make a difference in this climate change battle?
Yeah, I think we need to use a lot more energy, and it can't come from fossil fuels. So energy use per capita in the US has basically stagnated since the 1970s. We're not using more energy, even though we live in super developed places, and we want to use more energy, we want to drive more places, we want to do more things, we want to refine more metals, but we don't really do that because it's not quite worth it.
So we're actually getting more efficient.
Maybe more efficient, maybe using less, maybe building less.
Okay.
I remember, when I was really young, I used a whole megawatt hour of electricity. My dad got pretty mad about that. And it's sometimes you just can't use less. I thought very hard about how can I use less energy? And it's no, if I want to build the stuff that I want to build, I need to use much more energy. And there's basically nothing that I can do about it. And it's there's a certain amount of iron that we want to refine. There's a certain amount of stuff that we want to ship around the world. It really affects the GDP when you can't use more energy. And we're kind of in that situation with fossil fuels where it's not so much that we can't use them, it's that it's frowned upon. It's that people don't use them enough. It's that it's not oh yeah, let's just do it. Who cares? There's social impacts, there's consequences, and that's kind of how it starts, right? So it's not just this free thing that you can use. Whereas sunlight is just this kind of free thing that you can use. I lived in a van for a while, I had solar panels on my roof, and if I wasn't using the 400 watts that it was generating, it was just kind of a waste. I might as well just make a spark and just look at it for all day. It's not a waste because it's using all that energy anyway.
You lived, van life, a full van?
Oh yeah.
Why'd you do that?
I like to surf.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't like paying rent. Yeah.
Are you still in the van?
I'm not in the van. My sister's in the van now.
All right.
I lent it to her.
You recycled it.
Yeah, she's living her surf dreams.
What do you kind of think with AI right now? We have to talk about AI, but obviously what it can do for controlling the energy in the grid, but then also the fact that these AI farms they're so thirsty for energy.
Yes.
Where do you see solar playing in that?
Yeah, we talk to a lot of grid operators, a lot of solar farms that are serving AI. It's pretty interesting because energy in the past has been a steel mill or something random that has some variability, and the grid has to keep up with that random variability. And with data centers, it's just this stable power. We need 24 hours of maximum power, and it can never drop from that. And that's what data centers demand. That's what you need. And with solar, it doesn't work for that because it's like full power and then the sun goes down and it doesn't work at all. And it's like, okay, how do we fill in this? And it's like wind. Wind is like, what if it's not windy? You get all these issues, batteries, it's a big problem. So you end up burning, natural gas or, installing a nuclear power plant, which, by the way, we're not currently building new nuclear power plants in the US, so that's also a big issue, and it takes like 17 to 22 years. So we should fix those. Like, I'm very pro-nuclear, but it's not going to be immediate.
You build them you were building them in high school, so
yeah, well, a different kind. Yes. But yeah, it's a huge problem. Like, they need this incredibly stable base load power, and ideally it would come from solar, but that doesn't work right now. So yeah, we come in and we can make solar more of a base load power.
Okay.
We'll start off not doing fully through the night. We'll start off with just like the first couple hours after the sun goes down and before the sun rises, and that makes a huge difference. You need way less batteries. But yeah, that's where we're starting, and we're going to continue to build out the constellation.
Outside of what you're building, what are kind of your big predictions for the future of energy outside of the satellites?
Yeah, I mean, energy is a hard one. It's one of those ones that has an incredibly, it's a very slow growth rate on new technology developments. Like, it's obviously huge, commercialized. Like, you talk to anybody in the energy sector and they're like, yeah, I raised like $50 billion for XYZ projects. So the growth, the building is incredibly high. I think most things are going to be powered by solar in the future. I think everybody's going to have solar on their roofs. In Australia, it's actually cheaper to have solar panels on your roof generating power than it is to have just maintenance on the power lines to your house in a lot of cases. So I think things are going to become much more local. I think things are going to become much more solar. I think solar is also a really good thing to build, in developing nations like, Africa, South America, places like that. It's really cheap and easy to build a solar farm. It's like a bit of initial investment, but once you build that thing, it makes its power back really quickly. So it's the kind of thing that you can scale up super fast. Like, you can just like stick them on the ground. You don't even have to mount it to the ground. You can just like place a panel on the ground and it starts making power. So I think solar is really the future, and it's absolutely taking off. And most new energy is a solar installation, and we're only going to amplify that. So I like throwing that in.
Yes.
But I think solar is just like going to be the future, and everything's going to be powered by solar quite soon. It's just like, yeah, if you can get rid of the nighttime thing. That's really the only thing holding it back.
Love it. Ben, thank you so much.
Thank you.
One of the most exciting ways to combat climate change is to accelerate a customer-led revolution to technologies that improve their lives. It's nice to say, oh, you should do this or you should do that, but it's way better if we can provide technological solutions that actually improve customers' lives, and so they want them anyway. My name is Mary Powell, and I am the CEO of Sunrun.
The U.S. power grid is under strain. It's struggling to keep up with surging electricity demand, from AI data centers and electric cars to increased domestic manufacturing. The need for power is skyrocketing. And while large-scale wind and solar farms can help, connecting them to the grid takes years. But we currently generate more solar energy than we can store, particularly in places like California. So to maximize the impact of solar energy, battery storage that can hang on to that electricity is absolutely critical. Mary Powell, CEO of Sunrun, has a faster solution: more rooftop solar and battery storage units. Sunrun recently hit a major milestone, installing solar and battery systems in over 1 million U.S. homes. These systems create clean energy on-site and store it for later use, acting like small-scale power plants.
Sunrun is really so different than your traditional solar company. In fact, we talk about ourselves as being a clean energy lifestyle company. We are that beloved, trusted partner of customers, of Americans that want to transition their experience with energy, and they want to move to a more predictable, affordable, resilient way to power their homes and their lives. And we've really made a significant transition over the last 18 months to be what we call a storage-first company. So we went from installing storage with solar about 15% of the time 18 months ago to 54% of the time now. So our customers are customers that are capable of really having that affordable, reliable, resilient energy future that so many Americans are really demanding now as utility prices have gone up and as the reliability of so many utilities in the grid has become more strained and that reliability has gone down. To me, this acceleration of the customer-led revolution is so powerful because it is also the gateway to all of these other technological solutions that improve lives and happen to also really improve, emissions. Just Sunrun, what we've done already, we have saved consumers $1.3 billion.
In total, those 1 million homes generate at least 7 gigawatts of power and store 2 gigawatts of electricity. With electricity demand rising, rooftop solar is becoming a crucial part of the solution. The Energy Information Agency predicts solar power will be the top source of new energy this year, increasing by 42% in the second half. But the grid itself also needs urgent upgrade.
So I worked at a utility company called Green Mountain Power for 20 years. The last 12 years of which I was the CEO of the company. It's really funny because it's the one when I was first offered the opportunity to go to Green Mountain Power and work for a utility, I actually said no. And reportedly I said no 3 times, the CEO told me, before I finally said yes. And it became one of the most powerful lessons in life of I didn't know what I didn't know because I had all of these ideas about what it would be like and it was completely different. It ended up being like the most amazing opportunity to lead a radical transformation of a utility to become, as I like to call it, we were about becoming the unutility. We were about becoming innovative, customer obsessed, and delivering on an affordable, clean energy future. When I was the CEO of Green Mountain Power, way back in 2007, it became so clear to me that the grid of the past was not going to be the best grid of the future for the customers that we served, or really for any customers in America, that it foundationally was not built in an economically efficient way, and it certainly, as we were making the transition to clean energy, it certainly wasn't going to be the most effective way to deliver energy in the future. So as the CEO of Green Mountain Power, I actually leaned in hard to encouraging customers to go solar. Way back in 2007, we actually incented our customers to go solar, and we were the first utility in the United States to also put individual storage units, power walls at the time, into customer homes. So it's interesting that so many years later, I got the opportunity. I was asked if I would be interested. I was then on the board of Sunrun, and I was asked by the founders and the members of the board if I would be interested in becoming the next CEO of Sunrun. And it was one of those things, like I felt like, well, you kind of had me at hello, because this is the type of work I've been active in accelerating really since I'd been in the energy business, but in a massive way since I had become CEO of a utility. As I joined the utility industry, there was a massive ice storm that literally took down massive steel tower transmission lines that were bringing power from Canada to the US. So that, on top of time after time after time, because I'm a boots on the ground leader, so if there was ever any kind of climatic event, I was out and about visiting crews, knocking on doors of customers, making sure they were okay. And I saw so many instances where we had just made investments to storm hardy lines, and then those lines were on the ground. So it was really obvious to me, again, that the US grid, it's a 100-plus-year-old system. It's not its fault, but it was not built for economic efficiency, and it was not built for climate resilience. And so while we were going to need to continue to make investments in that grid, it also was so obvious that we needed innovation. We needed technological innovation, and we needed to provide, just like you've seen in so many other aspects of our lives. I think cell phones are an amazing example, right? How they transformed, the technology that we now know as telecommunications, right? That the same kind of thing, the same opportunity existed in the energy space. So it was really exciting as solar started to take off, and then with storage, that really makes solar so much more incredibly valuable for the consumer, but also for the grid. I did not always want to run an energy company. I grew up in New York City in an artistic home, and as I like to say, I actually felt sorry for people in business. I thought it seemed like a really kind of low value, boring existence. So I call myself the accidental executive. I truly feel like I've landed in the situations I have because I love people and I'm passionate about causes. And so, you know, I sort of fell into business because I didn't think I could support myself on my artistic talent at a young age. I was right about that. I don't think I would have been able to. And, you know, what I found is that my love of people, my love of cause, and my deep belief always that, like, to do great things requires amazing people, like, all wanting to accomplish the same thing together. And so that's, you know, I fell in love with leadership and leading change, and then the energy space just became such an incredibly powerful space for driving dramatic change, you know, expressing my passion for people and for providing solutions to customers. What I love about Sunrun, and when I think about the future, I get so excited because I feel like, oh my gosh, we're at 1 million customers. Oh my gosh, we're installing storage now over 50% of the time. We also have launched EV chargers, smarter panels. We're working on bundling products and services for customers for the future. And so when I look to the future, you know, I love to laugh with the team and think, oh my gosh, like, it'll be so fun, like 5 years from now, to laugh at how we thought hitting 1 million was so exciting. Like, it is truly about being the leader in, like, leading this customer-led revolution to a way better way to power homes, to power our lives, to power our transportation, and ultimately to power America's grid. Way back in 2015, as a utility executive, we demonstrated that by having storage and solar on homes, in homes, that we could actually reduce the cost of the grid for all the customers that we served. We would leverage those sources during peak summer months. We would leverage those to, what I always said the goal was not to beat down the peak, it was to flatten and crush the demand so that you're spreading it evenly over time and you're making the grid more cost effective by doing that. So it's really exciting that now, so many years later, Sunrun is at the scale where we literally have 16,000 customers enrolled in a program in California to help the grid for a significant period of time, leveraging all of those resources that are in homes, providing so much value to the consumer, but then also helping to make the grid more affordable and reliable for all.
Behind every great story of business success, there is one person, one supporter, mentor, investor, even customer, without whom that success story might not exist. Bill Gates has Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett had legendary investor Benjamin Graham. And Shiv Bhakta has Chris Harris. Shiv grew up in Texas, surrounded by energy companies. When he was hired by ExxonMobil right out of college, it was the first time anyone in his family had held a white-collar job. His parents, immigrants from India, hadn't gone to college and instead built their lives in America as entrepreneurs. Shiv was thrilled to work at Exxon, but soon realized he was not keeping up with his peers. That's when Chris entered his life and completely shifted the trajectory of Shiv's entire career. Shiv Bhakta, co-founder and CEO of Active Surfaces. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course, thank you for having me.
You were on the 2024 Forbes 30 Under 30 list, but you didn't start your career there. And we're here talking about career journeys for the one who changed everything. And so I want to ask you, who is the person who changed everything for you, without whom you would not be sitting in that seat?
It's funny because a lot of people come to mind. My fiance,
the team that we've built, the investors that are supporting us. And without them, this company and I wouldn't be where I am today. But I think the person that comes to mind at the very early part of my journey was my second boss, Chris Harris.
He was your second boss, so he's not the person who hired you, correct?
He was not the person that hired me.
Tell me, how did you get in contact? How did he become your boss? What do you remember about that time?
Yeah, so right after undergrad, I got my first white collar job, and not just mine, my entire family's first white collar job, because my mom and dad moved here from India in the 90s, and they were first generation immigrants. So they didn't go to college. My dad didn't finish high school. They were small and medium-sized business owners my entire childhood. So I grew up on the weekends and the evenings helping them. But then I remember being super jazzed and then not performing to the level I thought I could perform at, despite spending hours and hours more than my peers. And thinking, man, I'm spending all this energy. I'm really passionate about this work. I love energy. How come it's not materializing into something that's meaningful for both me and then my performance? And then Chris came along a year into my job. And he was transitioning from another job in Europe for ExxonMobil. And that was he was running multi-million-dollar capital projects. He came in with his family and he became the supervisor because my old supervisor shifted roles. And that's when I think my career really took a different trajectory.
What was the job you were doing when he took over your team?
I was a cost engineer. So I was helping folks in the refinery figure out how much of this capital project costs, if you want to change a pump or increase some piping or change a tank.
And you felt like you were not succeeding. Chris comes in, becomes your boss. And what does he do? What are the conversations you start having with each other?
Yeah, Chris is really great at making sure that he's identifying the potential in folks, and especially in folks that are often overlooked. And I remember thinking, Chris is a great guy. He's a family man. He has 2 daughters, spends a lot of time with them. He's a fitness nut. He's super health conscious. And I'm thinking, man, this guy is not only really focused in his personal life and really spending time with his family, but also excelling at work. And I think most importantly, he truly values people and he unlocks their ability to achieve their full potential. Maybe the key lesson that I took away from that was, it's not that people are winners and losers, but that it's a manager's job to bring out the best in someone so they can be a winner. And I remember feeling like a loser that then became a winner in the company just because of his support and his direction.
He saw the potential in you and he gave you guidance and you were able to make changes to what you were doing?
Yeah, so specifically, I remember I was a cost engineer, so I was working with different folks around the refinery to figure out project costs. And I think the skill sets that I had weren't perfectly meshed with that. So what he did was a couple of things. One is he helped me find and craft a new position, which is a big risk. He essentially lobbied for a new position to be created in his team that has never happened before and said, I think this position is needed in the company, and I think Shiv is the guy to do it. It was called a benchmarking analyst, where you work with project teams all over the world to say, should this project cost this much money? And this required data analytics, it required a lot of collaboration, it required a hustle to work with folks all over the globe. And he saw that maybe my strengths were communication, it was collaborating cross-culturally, it was focusing on analytics and data-driven decisions.
Wow, that's a special manager, someone who sees the skills and then literally crafts a new role. What's your sense of how rare or common that is in the corporate world?
It's very rare. I've had a few managers before and after, and all of them are great humans, but I think being able to take someone and help unlock what they're fully capable of is unique.
So he helps turn around your performance and I imagine your confidence. What happens next after you go from feeling like a loser to one who's succeeding?
It was the best position I've ever had before starting active services. But I still remember feeling that maybe Exxon wasn't my end goal. I grew up in Houston, so energy was in my blood. So I remember working at BP, working for EPC, the firm that designed refineries, and energy was all I knew. But Exxon was very slow to change. And I remember thinking maybe there is a bigger role I can play in helping mitigate the biggest crisis of our time, which is climate change. So I left, went to the US Department of Energy, worked in nuclear security for a while on nuclear energy. And then I went to a technology transfer office in the DOE, supporting national labs, commercializing technology. And all of that is what led me to MIT, and then ultimately starting this company.
MIT to go to Sloan, where you met your now business partner. Tell us about that.
When I first came to MIT, I had no idea how I wanted to make a dent in climate change. I just knew that was the North Star. It could be in a variety of different ways. And there's like most people working in this are great people that just want to play their small part. But I was fortunate enough to attend a class called Climate and Energy Ventures, where they pair PhDs with innovative technologies with MBA that are willing to hustle and make a difference. We met the very first day of class, and he brought his technology. He demonstrated it right after I was pitching my own idea for a company. But he fully convinced me that he was the guy to work on it. So I jumped right on.
And tell us, what does Active Surfaces do?
Active Surfaces is an MIT spin-out that creates lightweight, flexible solar panels that can be seamlessly integrated into the built environment. Imagine like a solar yoga mat that's cheaper to install, way lighter, and can be stuck onto any surface, enabling more power for more people.
More power for more people. So when I hear solar panel, I think of the big panels on people's roofs, or sometimes if you pass a field, it's, you know, in the rows and they're kind of standing up. I understand you have a sample, a smaller sample. Can you show me what you brought?
I do have samples. So most of the solar modules that we know today are based off of silicon solar cells. These are then connected into an array and into a module itself. There are 72 or 96 of these. And then these are encased in glass and stuck onto buildings. You can imagine that being very heavy, because that's a lot of glass, 1 meter by 2 meters. And the form factor is very rigid. So it doesn't adapt to the shape of the building or to other unique circumstances around the area. This is also very fragile. If you bend it too much, it shatters into 1 million pieces. This is why people way smarter than me, like my co-founder, Dr. Swartout, and the researchers at MIT, have developed something that's literally as lightweight as a feather. It's 100 times lighter. It could be rolled up and unrolled like a solar yoga mat. And it could be in a variety of form factors. Think fabric, plastics, and glass. You can do it all.
Fabrics, plastics, glass. So what are all the applications? Where are you starting?
This is just the beginning. So we say solar yoga mat because we think that's the most interesting go-to-market. It needs to be somewhere where we can produce a ton of this and then go down the cost curve. So we're starting with low-load buildings. Think buildings where you can't structurally handle the weight of solar. So you roll this up and then just unroll it with a fraction of the weight, so you don't have to structurally upgrade the building. But that's just the beginning. Then after that, you could laminate this onto a variety of materials. So imagine prefabricated solar facades. Imagine this being in space. Imagine this on the tops of cars. The possibilities are endless if you could stick a flexible, lightweight solar panel with the same performance on anything.
So we're currently in an era of electric vehicles. Are we moving into an era of solar vehicles if those are going to be on the roofs of cars?
I definitely hope so. I think this has the ability to extend the range of EVs fairly significantly.
We're dreaming right now. Let's bring us back to reality. So you meet your co-founder in this class and you start growing the company. What are those first few steps? Because it sounds sci-fi, but you obviously have product samples.
The entire point of this class that we were in together was to craft a business model that makes sense. Who are the customers? How do you manufacture this? How much money do you need? So over the span of that semester, we did customer interviews. We built like a reasonable go-to-market strategy. And then I remember a month into the class, we chatted and I was like, hey, Rich, there is a pitch competition at Harvard that you should go pitch at. You should take this technology. I think you have a good shot. And his response to me was, why don't you pitch? And I was like, oh, I know nothing about this. I'm just a random MBA that's just learning about your technology. But if you like, I'm down to help if you would like the help. And then he took the faith and to work with me, to believe in me. We went to the competition in like October of that year. The panelists were all VCs. Some of them are notable billionaires, and we ended up winning first. And that was the first time that I remember thinking, man, this truly has potential. People believe in it. The go-to-market seemed reasonable. Let's see how far we can take this.
As you're describing the pitch competition, I'm hearing some of those skills that Chris brought out in you or identified in you. Communication, cross cultures, I think in this case, translating climate tech for an investor audience. Were you thinking about him or thinking about your early days at Exxon as you were in this pitch competition?
Definitely. It's interesting because like the lessons you said, which is finding the talents of people, is kind of what led me to Rich and is what's helping me build the team that we have now. In that pitch competition, communication and clearly articulating a vision was super important. But so was also being able to effectively work with Rich and being able to see what his skills were, what my skills were, allocate accordingly. The number one reason startups fail is because founders have tension. And you need to be able to effectively work with someone that has different viewpoints, comes from a different background, and you need to be able to bring the best out of your teammate. And I think that is true not just from manager to employee, but also from peer to peer.
What year was that pitch competition?
2022.
2022. And then what happened after that?
What happened after that? Rich went on a honeymoon with his wife the same week, that December, where we had another pitch competition at the MIT 100K. I ended up winning first with the support of some of my classmates. And then it was a myriad of pitches. We won the full MIT 100K. We went to Singapore and won some pitch money. And then the company grew from just me and him going around pitching, building trust, getting VC traction to what it is now.
And then over the course of all these pitches in 2023, you draw the attention of Forbes editors and make the 2024 Forbes 30 under 30 list. And I understand after making the list, within 3 months, you got some funding. Tell us about this.
We did. That was exciting. This is a very difficult time to be raising money. Right after winning these pitch competitions, we were thinking, man, this like people believe in us. The market seems to have a true pain point that we can help identify. And if this was at global scale, we can make a real dent on climate change. So having all of that conviction, we went out to VCs to raise money. At first, it was kind of difficult just because of the interest rate environment, because people are very tight with their purses right now. But then we got a lot of good validation. I mentioned the pitch competitions, but also the Forbes. We then soon after closed $5.5 million, which was the first money into the company. And it was just me and Rich at that time. And now we're using that money to scale our operations, build a team of high impact, highly focused engineers and business development folks, and then getting manufacturing equipment and producing some of these Generation Zero scale.
What is Generation Zero in layman's terms? And I'm asking because I imagine someone watching this who might have a factory or a house with maybe an unconventional roof, they might want something like that right now. Can they get it?
They can definitely work with us. If you have that problem, definitely talk to us. We are going to start with innovative partners. There's a climate tech incubator in Boston called Greentown Labs that we're going to start collaborating with. And then once it's proven in a sandbox environment, so some field testing is done, we get the data to prove that it's safe and that's reliable, we're going to go and work with increasingly complex corporate partners. So this could be outside, like on buildings in the matter of a year or two.
Have you and Chris stayed in touch? Does he know he's the one who changed everything for you?
I was talking to my fiance about this last night, and I don't know if I've been as clear to Chris about how impactful he's been since we last stayed in touch.
You said that you're thinking about his lessons as you're hiring. Talk a little bit more about that. What are you looking for in people? And have you had to pivot one of your employees to a different role based on capability alignment?
The thing that he said once still resonates with me is that talent is universally distributed, but opportunity is not. And there are a lot of talented people that want to make a dent on climate change, that are interested in working with with Active Services, which is fantastic. I love to see that. But we want to make sure that we're picking not just the winners, like he didn't get to pick me to be on his team, but we're picking the people that are excited and we can best fit into the team and can best leverage to their full potential. And that's a lesson I've been taking. Our team grew from 2 to 8, and we are really focused on making sure that people feel compelled in their role, they feel like they have the support that they need. And the framework that Chris always used for me was clarity and competence. So we're making sure that every employee has a clear understanding of what they need to do to help the company succeed, and they have the skills they need to do that. And if they don't, we're helping them with training, helping them with redirecting their position, helping them with clarifying what objectives need to happen. A lot of that is just understanding where the human is coming from.
Where do you think you'd be had you not met Chris? Had he not become your manager at Exxon?
I would probably still be, I was in a refinery in Louisiana at the time. So I would probably still be at ExxonMobil working as an engineer like in the refinery, which would be exciting. I'm sure I would have loved it, but I would not be at MIT. I would not be on the Forbes list. I would not be founding a startup. I would not be making the same dent I am to climate change.
Interesting. So he identified your communication abilities and your capabilities as a worker, but what you just said was all about your entrepreneurial journey. Yeah. How do you connect those dots?
I think it's the confidence and the ability to know that like I could do more than what I was currently doing. The creativity I think he took to create a new job for me is something that's never happened before. And maybe if he could do that and make a new position where I can thrive in, then maybe I could make a bet on myself and go to the DOE. And maybe I can make a bet on myself and go and even consider applying to MIT. And then maybe even get accepted, maybe even found a startup, maybe even be on the Forbes list. So I think it's that the seed of being willing to challenge something, create something new, and actually have conviction behind it.
Interesting. So that one act of creating a new role for you opened up an entire career path. You also told me a story when we were on the phone the other week about Chris's traveling and how that inspired you. Can you talk a little bit about this? I know it's more fun than a day job, but I'm sure there are lessons there too.
No, of course. I remember the first time I met him, he had just came in from Europe and we were having a team lunch because he wanted to meet the team. And in the first couple minutes, he shared that him and his brother traveled the world for a year. And I remember thinking, this was a year out of undergrad, I was thinking, man, that sounds wonderful. I would love to quit and travel with my girlfriend then, she's now my fiance. And I remember thinking, man, I wonder if I can tell him that. Or am I gonna get in trouble for communicating this to a supervisor? But I was bold enough to ask. And he, instead of being like, no, like don't quit, we need you here, I need to hit my own internal KPIs, he was very supportive. And he said, wow, like, yeah, I'm glad to see that you have an interest in this. Let's figure out how we can make that happen. And that's partially what led to the role creation because he had 9 months to work with.
Interesting. So you basically gave him a deadline. You had 9 months and he created this role. Where did you travel at the end of those 9 months?
It was intending to be a year. This was winter 2019. And then my girlfriend and I, our fiance now, started traveling around Southeast Asia. So we went to every country in the region, Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Indonesia, Singapore, Philippines. And we were country hopping. But then by like March, April, as you can imagine, in 2020, we were escaping lockdowns, traveling around.
As you describe those countries, and maybe you were just going for fun, I wonder though if you saw the need for active surfaces in those countries, or did you observe anything about energy needs while you were traveling?
Energy is always in the back of my brain. I remember thinking that there was a lot of rural villages where energy access and grid reliability was an issue. I remember thinking that, I remember seeing solar panels in rural areas at that time, which was fascinating. And thinking, wow, like it's here, but it's very limited in its capability because you can't actually put it on the roofs. You can only use a small piece of land. The costs are probably not cost effective for some of these applications. So at the time I was seeing distributed energy play an impact and I was benefiting from it, having visited some of those areas.
Take me 1 year into Active Surface's future. If we were to speak a year from now, what would you want to report to us?
That we've made some of these using our new manufacturing equipment and we put them outside. They're demonstrated, it works. We've hit our technical and business development milestones in-house. Our team has increased to 10 to 12 and they're all hyper-focused and they love working with us. I think that is going to be the catalyst that separates a good startup from a great startup, is how quickly can you empower and build a highly motivated team. So hopefully in a year we have some stuff outside and the team's really excited about it.
And of course, we're talking for the one who changed everything. What would you tell folks watching who feel like they have not found the one who changed everything for them?
I remember before I found Chris, I was feeling really down on myself. So if there's anyone watching and you're concerned that you may not be living up to your full potential, that you haven't found the true mentor to really guide you and give you that vision in your life, just know that it only takes one. There's a lot of really great humans in the world, and I'm sure the many folks you've interviewed have had different ones that have changed everything. So keep that eye out, keep believing in yourself, and I'm sure you'll find one that will give you the confidence you need to keep going and make a difference.
And since you're taking Chris's leadership model into mind as you lead Active Surfaces, what's your advice for folks who want to be the one for someone else?
Truly care about your people. Care about the people that are often overlooked. Care about the people from where they're genuinely coming from, and then see the best of them. Because again, I don't think people are good or bad, or people are winners or losers, or people are great at their job or bad at their job. I think people have potential and it needs to be unlocked with the right structure, with the right clarity, with the right competence. And I think as a manager and as a leader and as the one that changed everything for someone, it's our job to do that. And hopefully I could do that the same way Chris did it for me.
I hope for that as well. Shiv, thank you so much.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Twice in the last 5 years, Apple hosted behind closed doors conferences for police agencies from across the world, bringing cops together at the tech giant's Cupertino headquarters to discuss the best ways to use its products. Forbes reporter Tom Brewster joins us to talk about what our reporting found and what it means for data privacy. Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is my Forbes colleague, Tom Brewster. Tom, thanks so much for coming on.
Good to be here.
You have some exclusive reporting about Apple and its Global Police Summit, which is at odds with how the public widely views Apple, its privacy policies, and its relationship with law enforcement. So as you point out in your reporting, take us back to 2015 when the public really saw a fracture between law enforcement and Apple.
Yeah, so that was the San Bernardino terrorist shootings, which I'm sure many people will remember. Shortly after that, one of the suspects' iPhones was locked and the FBI couldn't get into it. And their way of dealing with that was go and ask Apple, hey, can you unlock this? Apple said no, because if they do that, that shows that there's a backdoor, there's some sort of vulnerability that can be exploited. And, you know, hey, you might just come back to us and ask us to do that on repeat. So Apple, and I think Apple was, you know, very well supported by the privacy community on this. They said, no, we're not going to do that. You figure out how to get into the phone yourself. And it transpired after, I think it was after, you know, some months, a year or so, the FBI did figure out how to hack into that phone. So they were able to get into it. They were able to get the information they needed. And since then, Apple's really kind of ramped up its marketing on privacy. Really, it's you know, it's always been seen as, you know, very protective of its consumers. But since then, you know, you see these huge advertising campaigns around keeping people's data secure. You know, entire campaigns talking about the iPhone and how it's, you know, the most privacy forward phone you can get. So that's the kind of state of play with Apple at the minute. Yeah, it's, you know, I think that's kind of created a false perception maybe that they don't like working with the police and that they won't give over data when it's required. But that's not quite right.
That was really a contentious point back in 2015 because some said if Apple cracked into the phone, that would be a slippery slope. Others said exceptions should be made for terroristic activities. But how did Apple and law enforcement's relationship really evolve over the past almost decade since then?
Yeah, it's funny. I remember talking to the guy who ran an FBI agency out of California, the FBI office in California, and he had always maintained that the relationship with Apple was very good. And I wrote a story some years ago essentially saying that, you know, the FBI really, you know, the relationship is not that fractious as you would believe. Outside of that, though, Apple's really kind of kept its relationship with police very much kind of under wraps, or, you know, not even under wraps, they just haven't kind of promoted it in any kind of way. Whereas, you know, what's clear now from this public records request that we made with the Orange County Sheriff is that they really are, you know, properly collaborative. They have engineers, they have, you know, sales folks really going in deep with police agencies, both in the US and abroad, to discuss, you know, how can you roll out simple things like iPhones and have them working with police apps, but right through to like Vision Pro, which is really actually kind of where this story started for me.
And so then walk us through to the moment that they decided to do summits with police. What goes on there? Who's invited? What are they talking about? What does that look like?
Yeah, so from the emails and what I can tell, the first event was in 2019. So it's set up by a guy who is essentially tasked with government relations, you know, working with state and local agencies, whether that's police or whoever, or it seems like his main focus was police. 2019, this guy's been a year on the job. He sets up this thing called the Global Police Summit, invites agencies from, I think, over 20 different countries. I think agencies from 7 different countries turn up. So you've got, you know, Sweden, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, and then, you know, a bunch of agencies from the US as well. So the 2019 event happens. Apparently it's a big success. Police love it. They can't quite believe that Apple's invited them in to talk about this stuff. Hugely beneficial, according to an LAPD deputy chief that I spoke to. Then COVID hits, obviously. So no events take place for the next 3 years. And then 2023 comes around and here we go again. It goes from a 2-day event to a 3-day event. So, you know, clearly there was a successful original event that led them to believe that more cops would want to come, and they do. More cops come along. You get talks by the LAPD, New Zealand police, German police, and they talk about how they're using iPhones, CarPlay, all this different technology for a variety of reasons. You know, it's obvious things like communications, but also, like in the case of the New Zealand police, who just gave us the slides from their talk, they're using it to access huge intelligence databases, and to pivot off the information that's in there so they can chase down leads, so they can get information on where they are in a certain locale. So it's really, complex apps, really interesting apps that are being run off of iOS. And what's clear is that when police are going to Cupertino, going to Apple Park, they are meeting with Apple engineers on these different projects, on these different products, and they're being, the police are saying, hey, this is what we want. Apple engineers may be a bit quiet from what I heard, but they will work on these projects, and they'll say, yeah, we can make CarPlay into a usable system for your cars, so you don't need to have a laptop in your car, which is clunky and probably old and almost certainly not running off of Mac OS. Plus, the other crazy thing I heard was that those old laptops are actually kind of really dangerous because they're in this kind of metal case. If you crash, they go into you. And that was what one of the Californian agencies told me, is that having all this Apple technology working together is like it is for a consumer. Very easy to use, very intuitive, and it's what police officers want because they all have iPhones anyway. So yeah, we're at that point now where you've got a bunch of police agencies who love Apple technology and they want to use more of it. The kind of contention, I guess, comes is whether Apple wants to be a platform on which surveillance applications can be based, and that's where you get into kind of slightly stickier situation for Apple.
Yeah, and that's the big question here. So when the law enforcement officials are at this global summit, they're talking to international agencies, they're collaborating. Are they saying, hey, these are best practices, this is the tech we want to use, this will help us be better at our jobs? Does it ever cross the line of, hey, we're going to this is a better way to hack into private citizens' devices, anything like that? Probably not in those words, but in reality.
Yeah. I would say Apple would be way too cautious about anything like that, and I think even salespeople, overexcited salespeople who maybe want to sell some Apple technology to police wouldn't be pushing something like that, because they know that Apple really is pretty tough on that. They are not going to put a backdoor in their product. They're not going to just give over information to police without proper legal requests. So yeah, and Apple has that reputation to protect, right? If they get seen doing anything going too far with police, then yeah, they're going to lose some customers, obviously. So no, I think Apple's always been very strong on that point. This is really just about, there's a big market out there. Police spend billions and billions every year. Of course, tech companies want to get involved in that, and of course, a lot of this stuff is really beneficial for public safety. That's kind of hard to deny. Like if you have police who can, use Vision Pro wherever they are to access any kind of, surveillance screens or databases that they need, and it becomes quicker and more intuitive, and that helps police on the ground be safer, I think a lot of people would be behind that. But again, for me, it's, if there are surveillance products that police are making and they're building them on top of iOS or Mac OS or whatever Apple product there is, maybe that's where things get, not so easy to get behind. Because if you've got a mass surveillance system, which is essentially kind of what New Zealand is running with this national database that they use, and it's the Apple technology, it's the Apple app that New Zealand's built that accesses that, it becomes a bit more interesting and a bit more complicated for Apple, at least, to sort of continue along this line that they have, which is, hey, we are the most privacy focused tech provider you could think of.
Apple is walking a really tight line here. It's developing cutting-edge technology. If you have an Apple device, anything from an iPad, a computer, to your phone, your entire life is on there. Everything from photos for the past 10 years to your credit card information. It's also a company that touts privacy and protecting customers' data. So how does Apple square this away? What's the benefit of collaborating with law enforcement, and what are critics saying?
Yeah, well, so I think, again, it's down to how well Apple silos their different departments, right? You've got a sales team who wants to sell to police and take advantage of that market. You've got what is actually a kind of a profit-losing department, which is the law enforcement response team, who are the guys who take in the legal requests, and say, yes, we can give you that data because maybe there's someone who's been kidnapped or there's a child in danger. Of course, you can have that information. So as long as Apple, I think, keeps those two departments split, it can go out and say, hey, look, yes, we're going to sell technology to police. They're just another customer. Of course we are. We sell to lots and lots of different businesses and state and local government organizations, federal agencies, use our technology because it's, hey, it's the best technology in the world, according to Apple. But they can't really get away from the fact that, they can't get away from the fact that they haven't ever told the public that they're doing these global police summits, that they're welcoming police in to talk about this stuff. So there's a perception issue there, I think. But like I said, the other problem is if, Apple, okay, let me give you an example. So Apple's been fighting this Israeli company, NSO Group, which creates malware. It's a surveillance system that goes and collects information from iPhones and hacks into them. That is a very, problematic piece of software, but it is a legal piece of software that police agencies use. So if you think about maybe other surveillance products that police are creating, if they become problematic, and yet, Apple in some way at some point has either supported or given engineering advice that helps police set up that surveillance project, maybe that gets a little bit more controversial for them. So I think critics are really I think they're not, aghast or going crazy about this. I think they're more just a little bit anxious about Apple getting too close to the police, especially those creating, some of these gnarlier surveillance technologies.
And you've covered this relationship over the past 9 years. What does the future of the relationship between Apple and law enforcement look like?
Yeah, it gets a bit interesting because in the public records that we got back, essentially, it looks like they've kind of canned this police summit, and the guy who was running it is now no longer at the company as of August. So it's hard to say. Maybe they're going to set up other events. Maybe they're just going to go more local, more, stick to Californian agencies who really seem to be the ones using a lot of this. Or, maybe they'll just go quieter on it and just, maybe not do emails that journalists like me can go and get. I think that, their relationship will still exist. They will continue to sell products to police. Vision Pro is a really good example of a technology that I think a lot of police agencies can make use of, for instance. So a lot of police departments across America are setting up these things called real-time crime centers, which are basically kind of hubs for surveillance data that make it super easy and super fast to get all the surveillance information that you want and access to all the kind of, police records, arrest records, everything else. And usually you have to go to like a center to sit there in front of a whole bunch of screens, kind of Minority Report style. But to make it even more Minority Report, though, you can put one of the Vision Pro headsets on, and you can be sat at home or wherever you are. You can be sat in your police car, and you can suddenly access all this stuff. Or you can use the virtual reality stuff, and you can look over there, and the headset's going to tell you, oh, that's a building where there was domestic abuse. That was a building where a robbery occurred, whatever. So those kinds of technologies are, it's very kind of RoboCop and futuristic. And, on that side of things, I think people are maybe a little bit scared about, what policing looks like in the future. But they are obviously very incredibly useful technologies for police. So I can't see any other way forward other than Apple continuing to sell. Whether they'll do things like the Global Police Summit, which, cost money, maybe don't make as much money as Apple wants in return for setting those up, I don't know. But yeah, they'll carry on working with police for sure.
Well, Tom, certainly a lot of things to weigh here as you give us the exclusive look inside this relationship. Thank you so much for your reporting. I appreciate the conversation.
No problem. Good to chat again.
I was in New York City, but I lived in Jersey. And when I went home into Jersey and I popped into a local liquor store, I realized that that same bottle that I was seeing on a liquor store shelf in Manhattan for $300 was $150 in Jersey. And I was like, wait a second, there's a real disconnect here if I can drive over a bridge and pay half the price. Whiskey and alcohol distribution in general is really, really siloed, state by state, country by country, and there's no transparency in the market to figure out what you should be paying, what the real market price is, and what other people are willing to pay for bottles that they can't get their hands on. So Baxis really came to be as a way to bridge that gap, to create transparency in the market and access so people anywhere in the world could buy and trade bottles that they might not have readily available to them. Baxis is a secure vaulting platform and marketplace. And so what that means is people send us their personal collections. And these are bottles that could be new releases, and these are bottles that in some cases are from the 1800s and early 1900s. We provide temperature-controlled insured storage and vaulting solutions. And then those bottles go into their account. So users access a dashboard where they can see the bottles that they have in their account, interesting information about the bottles, historical information. And then the most important part for a lot of them is that they can actually track the prices. And so we provide all of the auction data, secondary pricing data that we can gather in a chart for them to track the values and then allow them to list their bottles for sale directly. What we found, and kind of our little joke, but our real growth hack is not going to the whiskey collectors, but we go to their significant others and we're like, hey, so what if you could get free storage and insurance for all of the stuff taking up your house? And 2 days later, we get a call, my wife would like these 300 bottles out of my house by tomorrow. For anyone looking for, a growth hack in the collectible space, let me tell you, go to the spouses, not the collectors. One of the issues with auction houses, which I've used in the past, is you'll send in your bottles, it'll take a couple of weeks, then they run the auction for a couple of weeks, then it takes them a couple of weeks to collect the funds, and by the time they're done with everything, it's 2-3 months between when you sent in your bottle and when you get paid. And that drives a lot of people to gray markets that exist, private groups where there's a lot of fraud because you don't have that layer of security. And so what we wanted to do was create that instantaneity of it, allow you to buy more things, allow you to sell more things. We do a 360-degree scan of every bottle at Baxis, and the reason for this is multifold. One is the authentication process and being able to run computer vision models to double check on the authenticity. But the other one is that when you're buying something rare and collectible, the condition matters. Trading cards get sent to PSA or CGC for grading. That doesn't exist for whiskey. So I want to make sure, is the label in pristine condition? Is it ripped? Is the tack strip torn? How does the liquid look inside? And so all of that is really important to the buyer. And even when you're using websites or liquor store websites, they're usually using stock images. And so you don't know if you're getting the exact bottle that they're telling you about. Sometimes they might even get the addition or something wrong because the store owner doesn't know. And most brands actually reuse UPC codes. So you'll actually scan a barcode and it'll come up as the exact same as last year's edition. They don't change it for year to year. So a guy who works in the store doesn't even know. When we first launched, NFTs were at their absolute height. So people are talking Bored Apes and JPEGs and all that. And we're like, guys, this is great technology, but like you're missing what it can be used for. What was really important for us with Baxis was building both for the future as well as the interoperability that blockchain provided and the security. So when you trade someone a token, they own that bottle now and they can redeem and ship that bottle. And if you're a blockchain user, if you're in Web3, if you understand it, there are so many things you can do. The other day, somebody traded a bottle of whiskey that was stored in Baxis's vault, because they're all tokenized, for a Magic the Gathering card that was tokenized in somebody else's vault. That's what this unlocks, is that in the future, all of these different blockchain protocols can now fit in with your whiskey collection. No one cares about what web services platform Netflix is hosted on. They care that they can click a button and watch a movie. Our users are not going to care how we build it, they just care that it works. Our core user, the people that we really wanted to appeal to, was whiskey lovers, was collectors, and not just whiskey, but spirits and wine in general. And so we need to bring it to where they were at. And for most of them, they're familiar and they're comfortable with a website. They can log in with an email, they can pay with a credit card. And so all of those are things that we put really at the forefront of Baxis. You can use crypto if you want to, but you don't have to know anything about it. I had built and run small businesses that I had built up, but it's very different than trying to build a venture-grade enterprise. So it was tough at the beginning to get kind of that interest, I would say, even from like VCs, where like they understood the idea of like what they're calling real-world assets or RWAs, but they didn't know much about the whiskey markets or the spirits markets or the wine markets and understand how large they were. We kind of had this opportunity to try and fail a lot, at a small scale, leading into the end of 2022 when FTX collapsed, and we were like, no, we're like heads down focused on building for the whiskey community, building for the spirits community. And so that bear market didn't really affect us. If anything, it made us stronger, because when it started to ease up, people are like, wait, these guys are still around. 2023, when we launched the marketplace, we started to get that that momentum. We expected people would send in a couple of bottles here and there, but we started to get real collections. We had a substantial amount of trading going on. Whiskey collectors were raving about the platform because they're like, wait, these are bottles I've been looking for. It's an ability for me to sell. And that really took off and caught some VC attention. And so we ended up raising our seed round and really just been scaling ever since. The nice thing about SaaS companies is as long as you have a computer and an internet connection, you can run your company. For us, we need physical space to store the bottles. So we are opening actually our second vault now in Jersey. We're going to be opening a couple more in the US at the end of this year, and then one overseas, our first overseas vault, and scaling both the physical infrastructure globally to add more users, as well as the engineering support on the back end to be able to really deliver, features and products to those users. There's this disconnect between brands and consumers. A distillery will sell their bottles to a distributor who sells their bottles to a liquor store who sells their bottles to you, who sells the bottles to me, who sells the bottles to someone else. And so by the time it gets to the end consumer, the brand has no idea who their biggest fans actually are. We can say there is an account that has 50 of your bottles. And so being able to connect and show brands, first of all, here's how you can really connect with your consumers, which we've already done with a couple of brands, and they've loved it because we did a private barrel pick down at Wild Turkey. And so we went into the database and we found the 2 largest collectors of single barrel Russell's Reserves, like Wild Turkey's product. And we brought 2 users down who have each of them over 50 or 60 bottles of like single barrel Russell's Reserve. And they had never met anyone from the brand. They loved the product, they loved the brand, and they got to pick that barrel with us themselves with Bruce Russell. And they were huge fans before, but now they're lifelong fans. And that's really special also because there is such a social and a nostalgia element tied into whiskey and into spirits. It's what did you see your dad drinking? What did you see your grandfather drinking? What was your mother drinking? And so that kind of shapes the way that people perceive alcohol. And so building those real connections and not just making people think of them as large companies is really cool and really special because the people who work in the distilleries and in the brands really care. They're really passionate. What's cool about the blockchain element is because each of the bottles is scanned, and this was something else that really motivated me, and it lives permanently on the blockchain, we now have this digital encyclopedia and this digital archive, because the thing about whiskey is it's so finite. So a single barrel, an old release, once they're gone, they're gone. They're gone from the face of the earth. They can never recreate the 1976 Jack Daniels, which might have just been to most people a regular Jack Daniels in the 70s, but now sells for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars because there are just so few of them left, and the whiskey is genuinely different. And so, yes, it's sad to see them go, but it's also great knowing that they're actually getting consumed because as a whiskey lover, I want to sit around with my friends and my family and enjoy a little piece of history. And so it makes me happy knowing that somebody's doing that, but it makes me happier knowing that even if those bottles vanish off the face of the earth, that there will be a permanent digital archive so that if somebody does stumble across one of these bottles in 50 or 100 years from now, all of the information that they'll need will be stored on-chain because of access.
The way that we socialize have increasingly turned to online socialization, the metaverse, that is its actual final vision. But I think it's gonna happen first in games.
Peggy, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm super excited to talk about all you're building with Ego. Before we get into all that you're working on company-wise, I want to know a little bit more about yourself. Can you give me a 30-second pitch to who you are?
I'm one of the co-founders of Ego. So I actually was born in China, and I moved to the United States when I was 2 years old. I grew up in Wisconsin, Midwest, went to elementary, middle, and high school there. And then while I was in high school, I joined my school's robotics team. That's when I kind of fell in love with technology and engineering and kind of continue wanting to pursue it. I was very lucky to have gotten into Stanford. And while at Stanford, I pursued a lot of my interests in research and robotics, self-driving cars, and AR/VR. Mostly, so the story behind self-driving cars was I was a really bad driver when I was 15 and a half years old, and I got into 3 accidents my first year. And I kind of outed myself on camera, but don't ever let me drive. And basically, from that moment on, I decided that I would automate myself and people like me out of driving, and ended up doing a lot of robotics work. And while doing robotics work, I realized that there was a big similarity between kind of 3D perception and environment in robotics and self-driving cars to also the AR, VR space and in gaming and 3D. And so that's eventually why I went to Meta full time. I worked on AR, VR avatars relating to the metaverse, and eventually met my co-founder and decided to start Ego.
Yeah.
And so that's where I am
Very
today.
cool. I want to go back. You said that, you know, you kind of grew up being obsessed with the robotic space
Yeah.
and interested in like building in that industry. Can you tell me like the first time that you realized that robotics was something you were interested in?
Ooh, I think it was like when I first started coding. Actually, I first started coding on a TI-84 calculator. There was like the basic kind of little like language in there, and my first game that I ever programmed was Snake.
Okay.
And then while I was programming the game, the person who taught me how to program on the calculator was actually in the school's robotics team. And then when I went there, they taught me how to use C++ to basically teach the robot how to throw like basketball and like things like that. And just kind of seeing like what I coded like actually show up in like a physical space was super, super powerful. And I was like, that was like the magic moment when I was like, oh, like I gotta pursue this. Like this is like my life's passion.
Yeah.
Like I want to continue doing it.
I love that. So you kind of started with gaming, went into some other spaces within the robotics industry, and now you're back in the gaming industry. Can you tell me a little bit about what Ego does?
Yeah, so we're making an infinite game with an AI 3D simulation engine. So what that means is that we want to make a game where people can play forever, and they can actually change the game as they play it with natural language. So AI has gotten to the point where you can now create entire like worlds, stories, characters with just natural language, and you don't have to know how to code. And what's even more interesting is that now these agents are actually very human-like. So because the way that natural language works, if you add like the memory system, if you add a brain and reasoning system, and if you add actually like a perception system and basically the ability for the agents to do actions and to write code in a 3D space, they actually behave exactly as a human, you would expect human to behave in those spaces. And that's actually one of the reasons why I think I started with robotics and I kind of come a full circle with these agents in 3D spaces, is because you actually have like the same perception system, right? So in a robot, you kind of perceive the environments around you, you figure out like where this object is or where that object is, and then you figure out like how you want to pick something up, or you see something and you're like, oh, what do I need to do to finish this task? And you actually do the same thing with agents in gaming.
Okay.
And so what's really interesting is that I feel like my stories kind of come up full circle, where it's like, oh, like the same brain, like the AI brain, like the reasoning behavioral engine that you use in robots, you can actually apply to agents in gaming. And so that's one area of really interesting thing that we started with Ego. And the other thing, obviously, is that the fact that agents can actually write code directly into the game engine. So if you find like a bug, or if you are a player and you want like this new thing appearing in your game because you're just very interested in that, your agents can like kind of change the game directly while you're playing it and like make that object or level or map appear in game. And so we think that's really powerful, and it's actually like a new way of gaming.
Yeah. So essentially you're allowing people who don't really know about the coding space to essentially code these games, correct?
Yeah, so we want basically gamers who I would say like 99% of gamers don't know how to code.
Yeah.
Even though I feel like once you're into it, like a lot of people start like researching how to mod games, they start researching like how to build games. But because they don't have the technical skills, it makes it really hard for them to actually bring their imagination to life. And so what we've found at Ego is like, well, if you can just code up entire levels or games using just natural language, and all you have to do is just like allow the users to like speak it into existence, or to basically type it into existence, that's really, really powerful. And so this is essentially what we are building with Ego and what we're continuing to build today.
So what phase of the company are you at right now? Are there people who are using it? Is it in like a beta test right now? Where are you at with this kind of development?
We're very early. So we went through Y Combinator, we raised a seed round, And we're kind of focused on building a private beta for GDC next year. And so we have like some people kind of testing it, but I would say a lot of the work right now is a lot of R&D and just like having the internal team test it and make sure that we're able to use it very well. Because I think one of the things is if you're a game developer and you find it like super easy to build games with just, a couple words and natural language, then it obviously, hopefully, like once we start opening it up to other people, like they would also find it really easy and we can iterate it from there.
How are you guys planning to monetize Ego once you are like to the public?
Yeah, so we're gonna monetize it mostly through both the game and creations.
Okay.
So for anything you create, so mostly for like AI agents that you create, you can sell them on the marketplace, you can trade them with other people, you can sell accessories and cosmetics. So all of these things you can do. You can sell battle passes, and you can also sell games and mini like experiences inside of Ego as well.
Okay.
So drawing a lot of inspiration from traditional gaming economics.
Totally, yeah. Have investors like understood this mission of yours? What have those conversations looked like? Are they looking for other things from you guys that you then are building out, or what have those conversations been like?
We hope that all the investors who have invested in us believe in our mission, because I think that is. We were very fortunate to have raised a relatively big seed round and have a lot of investors who are very interested in investing in us, and some of whose money we couldn't take because that would put us, as taking more dilution than we had planned on doing. And so actually, I think all of the investors who have actually invested in us do believe in the mission. And we actually really love working with them. And so it's a great opportunity.
So who is your target user base for?
Just gamers, people who like to play games, people who are consumers, people who just really, really like games.
Yeah. In terms of your funding journey, you guys are a YC company. You said you raised a seed round as well. What is your pitch to these investors in like very simple language for maybe an investor who doesn't know so much about the AI space? What's your pitch of why you guys are worth investing in?
Yeah, so I think like one of the main things that we pitched was that in kind of this age of AI, you have to make a game that's also a game engine. So I think a lot of times people are like, oh, if you want to make games, you can just like create them in Unity or Unreal or Roblox, and then they would just appear. But we found it actually really hard because a lot of people, this sounds bad, a lot of people are not very creative. And so the top like 1% of all creators make like 99% of like all the content that people play and generate like 99% of all the revenue. And a lot of where creators kind of like make these things come from actually existing games and existing mods. And so actually, if you look at some of the most popular games like Dota, like League, Counter-Strike, they all came from mods of previous games. And even a lot of the game engines actually came like Unity, Unreal, they came out of basically the teams building the infrastructure to make existing games. And so what we found is that like in these spaces, like a lot of people play Minecraft today, and a lot of people really like a lot of kids like kind of get into coding by playing Minecraft. I mean, I got into coding something different with Snake, but kids today get into coding using Minecraft and playing Roblox. And so we thought that if we build a base game where people are very, very interested, like very similar to Minecraft, something that's very creative, something that people can spend hours playing, and that's really fun, they will naturally want to continue modding the game and would want to basically, because these are kids and we're not targeting like Roblox age kids, we're targeting kind of older people, older kids like 16 to 18 plus. They're interested and they have kind of some skill set, like some creativity, some skill set, some motivation to actually play the game, but also use natural language to change the game as they play it and to be able to create new games and new experiences. And so that's kind of what we pitch to investors. And I think investors really, really like the idea that it's kind of a combination of Minecraft and Roblox. And it's because it's like Minecraft if you had like a base game, and then Roblox in terms of you can like create games and mini experiences on top of it.
Yeah, for sure. Why was it important for you guys to have, because you mentioned in your answer there that you wanted to have a game, but also a game that you could build on top of,
Right.
as opposed to like a software that people can just build their own game in and of itself, or something along those lines. Why was it important for you to have kind of both sides of that?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of reasons. I think like the main reason is this is such a new technology that we don't even know what games built with AI is going to look like. So for one reason to build, before you can build the tools to do that, you actually need to build the base game so you understand, you are your own customer,
Right.
like you understand like what you're looking for in that and be able to build kind of infra that powers that. The other thing is, I think, again, like it goes back to the creativity question, is that people find it much easier to remix content, like TikTok is a prime example of that, versus creating entirely new content. And I mean, right now, like if you go on social media, everything's kind of people like remixing content. And so we thought that the best way in games for people to remake content is actually to create a base game for people to edit and move on from that. And so, yeah, I guess like fan fiction is another example of that, creative writing, all of those things. And so we want to lower the barrier of entry to creativity as much as possible so that people can build on top of it.
That definitely makes sense. Do you have any predictions, like as you're deciding what to build, how you're going to build it out? Do you have any predictions about what the future of gaming is going to look like?
I think the future of gaming is going to look like the future of media. So that, I mean, I think the prime example is like kids are spending more and more time playing games. They're playing spending more time playing Roblox or spending more time playing Minecraft. And eventually we actually think that gaming is gonna replace in-person socialization. I think it already kind of have. Like people are, like kids today, they're like socializing on Discord and they're socializing on Roblox and they're socializing on Minecraft. And they actually hang out with their friends in their like virtual 3D avatars in these like 3D virtual spaces already. And when we grew up, I don't know, maybe I was kind of in that like in-between phase as well, when people like would grow up on social media. It's like you kind of use like Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat, and you kind of use that as a way to kind of keep in touch with your friends like after school. And you like texting was kind of the new big thing. Like kids will, you know, start having their cell phones and everything. And so the way that we socialize have increasingly turned to like online socialization versus in-person socialization. And I think games are kind of the next step of that, is it will replace kind of a lot of, you know, film, like TV, and it will also, it has already replaced some in-person socialization. And I think in the future, it's going to continue to be like that. I think like Mark Zuckerberg's notion of the metaverse, like that is its actual final vision. Personally, I don't think it's going to happen in VR first, but I think like it's going to happen first in games.
Yeah. Do you think that's a good thing, to be moving stuff out of real life and then into these online platforms?
I think it could be a good thing or could not. That's why I actually have on my LinkedIn profile that we're building a matrix, because I think like eventually when we're moving towards that situation, it's going to be very, very similar to like living in a simulation or like living in the matrix. So I actually don't know if it's a good thing, but I think like if people are happier doing that, and it seems like they are, then eventually that will be a good thing for humanity.
Yeah. You've worked at places, you know, outside of Ego too, that has probably definitely helped you inform like how you're building this company, one of those being Meta. What are some of those like lessons that you've learned from those other jobs that have been implemented into now what you're building?
Yeah, so I think like robotics was like pretty obvious. Being able to understand like how robots think and perceive the world, and like bringing that into 3D agentic behavior and 3D agents that are able to perceive the environment in our games is really, really powerful. So just a lot of technical similarities there. AR, VR was definitely kind of what, so I worked at Meta on Meta Reality Labs, worked on Oculus as an internship as well, working on machine learning for AR, VR, avatars, and the Oculus itself. And so one of the things that I found that was like really interesting is that was kind of the moment where I understood that like the 3D AR VR gaming space has a very similar kind of technology and to the robotic space. And so that's when I kind of connected the dots.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, like what I built in like agents in the physical space, like robots, that can also apply to games. And so that was, I think, one of the most useful things I've learned. And because I worked on all parts of the robotic stack, I worked on like 3D perception, I worked on behavior planning, I worked on controls and actions and coding. And I also, my background is computer science with an AI track from Stanford. So kind of getting that AI background and mixing it all together, like I feel like it kind of ended up by accident, but like looking back and like, I think Steve Jobs said, you always like connect the dots when you're looking back.
It all makes sense now.
It all makes sense now because like, I feel like my background actually like fits me quite well in what we're doing today, because gaming, even just general gaming, not even just AI gaming, is like a mixture of like many different types of art forms. It's like sound design, it's narrative design, it's programming, it's art, it's 2D art, it's 3D art. Like all of it combined is probably one of the hardest kind of art forms. And science, like it's a mixture of art and science to actually build. And I think like the same thing kind of happens in robotics. And I feel like I'm just like really drawn to something where it's like very kind of hard problems to tackle like systematically.
My last question for you is, in the next couple of years, or let's say like 1 year, you said that you have like a funding announcement coming out. What else is to come with Ego? Is there something you are most excited about that's, you know, on the horizon right now?
Yeah, so at GDC, we're releasing our beta version of Ego, which is the game and the game engine, and we definitely want people to try it out.
Yeah.
So we're very, very excited for that, and hopefully like the funding announcement drives a lot of traffic to people who want to try it out. So we're very excited for that. I think it's going to be super cool. So yeah, I'm very excited.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today. This was great to hear about all you're building.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Alex.
The construction industry in the U.S. is a $2.1 trillion industry, which has historically been driven by human labor. Though the COVID-19 pandemic sent the industry into a tailspin with people working from home, supply chain issues, and rising material costs, it's still one of the largest sectors of the U.S. economy. But it hasn't fully recovered.
Supply chains aren't back to normal. Labor is still absolutely constrained, but contractors know this, and when they're going in to bid into new projects, that's ultimately calculated into their bid.
And it's these costs that have construction firms looking for new ways to evolve. One company paving the way towards change is Suffolk Construction, based in Roxbury, Massachusetts, and led by its chairman and longtime CEO, John Fish.
Fish is not your typical construction CEO. On the one hand, because he's not a hired hand. He literally built the business from the time he was a 20-something in the 1980s until the present. So he knows the company, he knows its strengths and its weaknesses. Secondly, and this is important, Fish is the sole proprietor of Suffolk. Suffolk is a $6 billion annual revenues company, and Fish is the one who makes every key decision in the business. He's really geared the business toward embracing disruptive technologies, venture capital investments, and embracing that sort of thought leadership position in how the built world is changing from technology.
I think one of the most unique things that Suffolk is doing on the technology front is that we have an innovation process that's connected to a larger digital ecosystem that's responsible for identifying, testing, and scaling solutions quickly and sustainably. And so we always have our eye towards cutting-edge startups.
Since 2019, Suffolk has invested over $50 million across over 50 different construction tech startups. Some are utilizing artificial intelligence, others are building robots to work on construction sites, others are in 3D printing, and some are more conventional software plays for subcontractors and other construction firms.
Robots can do a lot for construction. We have robots that are doers, they install work. We have robots that are collecting data and information. We have robots that are bringing data and information to the field, a task that a human would typically be doing, going out in the field, taking pictures or scanning, can now be done with a robotic dog.
3D printing, some of these other applications have been out there for a while. And I would still say probably the acceptance rate of AI in the industry is probably still pretty slow. There's folks that have their way of doing things for a long time. And whenever you're introducing something that's disruptive to that, I think there's ultimately always some pushback.
Fish says that, by embracing these technologies, yes, you're going to have to spend more money now, but in the long run, you're going to be saving money because you're going to be using less human labor. And of course, a lot of people might feel queasy about that. Do we want to radically change the way that buildings are constructed using less humans and more machines, especially when the construction industry has figured so prominently as a driver of economic growth?
Technology and artificial intelligence and robotics are augmenting our workforce. They're not replacing our workforce. They're making our workforce more efficient. They're making our workforce safer, and they're allowing them to focus on the important things in their day-to-day. And what's most important to us is that our people and our workforce go home safe at the end of the day, that they feel productive, that they feel that they are able to execute according to the project plan in a way that is reliable, safe, and high quality. And if technology can enable that, that's the vision for the organization, is to continue to allow technology to drive the industry to be more productive and to enable our workforce to operate in that way. Whether it's data or whether it's technology, there's always a human element to everything that we do because people build buildings. That's a really important piece for us as we continue to move forward as an industry, is thinking about that connectivity between those two elements.
Fish says it has to be done, that efficiencies have to improve if we're going to continue to develop commercial real estate, if we're going to replace the crumbling infrastructure that this country is beset by. And I think it's going to be a lingering area of debate, especially as these technologies get introduced more and more.
I was always very entrepreneurial. In high school, I used to buy these watches from Amazon and I'll resell them. And then when I got to college, that's when my motivation really took off of I'm capable of anything I put my mind to.
I'm here with Xander Isaacson, the founder and CEO of Zeal. Xander, thanks for joining us.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Give me a 30-second pitch. Who are you and what do you do?
I'm Xander Isaacson. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Zeal. And what Zeal is, we created the first self-reliant protocol, which makes payments, authentication, all of that work without cloud computing or the server, which basically means we just make electric vehicle charging stations work without any dependency on the internet. So no driver gets stranded, building managers never lose money on transactions, and we can accelerate the future with just a reliable charging experience.
Now, you're into the world of electronic EV charging. Make it exciting for me. Let's pull me in.
So when I first joined the industry, I don't belong in the industry. I was working in investment banking and I saw this really cool race that goes on in all these different cities, Tokyo and all throughout South America and Brooklyn. And it's sort of like F1, but it's called Formula E. The E stands for electric. So when I went to this race, I didn't even know what electric vehicles were besides a Tesla and those clunky cars.
Were they racing like Nissan Leafs? What was going on?
No, these look like F1 vehicles.
Okay.
They were lean, they were sharp. I didn't even know that. I had asked someone if these were electric. And then when the race goes off, they're going 200 miles per hour, you don't hear a thing. And the reason why they get these permits in these cities is because there's no noise pollution. Nobody hears it, so it doesn't annoy anybody.
Okay.
And then when I'm sitting there and I'm looking at these vehicles go, humming and going 200 miles per hour, they look like lean, literally normal race cars. One of them hovers over this blue glowing light in the road, and it got a huge power boost that allowed it to accelerate faster than the other vehicles. So when I'm reading all these things, preparing for a research commentary and everything, it made sense. It wasn't just these buzzwords, autonomous and connected and electric all moving together. It was the fact that this is literally a computer on wheels that can do anything. It's the future smartphone with unlimited processing
What's
power.
the blue thing it went over?
Bluetooth connected power vault.
Wow, so it's like literally like a
Mario
video,
Kart.
It's like a video game. Like you hit the speed boost.
They literally modeled it after Mario Kart. Yeah.
So that got your mind of like, okay, this like EV thing is
not just vehicles. It's the modern day iPhone times 1,000. It's the idea that it's the same transition from horses to cars, as now you're in this spaceship that you don't feel the road at all. You can do unlimited things, and most of these new models, the Hyundai, the Kia, the Ford F-150 Lightning, they have self-driving. They can move their own lanes, and it's exciting.
So what made you go from seeing that moment of seeing the EVs racing to I'm going to be an entrepreneur to this is what I'm going to do? Like, tell me that evolution.
That goes a little bit back. I was always very entrepreneurial. I think in elementary school, I was buying Yu-Gi-Oh cards and putting them in a white little paper, folding it up. In high school, I used to buy these like watches from Amazon and I would resell them. And then when I got to college, that's when like my motivation like really like took off of like, I'm capable of anything I put my mind to. And that kind of came from the wrestling days in high school.
Okay.
And to go a little more back, I was awful at wrestling, the worst. I lost every single match. And there was this quote on the wall, and it was from Dan Gable. And it said, "He who says he can and he who says he can't are both usually right." So I brought the mentality when I got to school. And Penn State is, there's 50,000 students. And I found out about this little fund called the Nitty Line Fund. And it's a student-run hedge fund where they manage real investor capital, no endorsements at all, no endowments at all. It's $13 million now. Mm-hmm. And 10 people get in a semester. And I went for it my freshman year. I didn't get in. And then I went for it again my second year, and I got in. And then the next 3 years was just about finance and getting a job on Wall Street.
When you're in that fund, are you supposed to invest in fellow students or alumni? What was?
No, so we operate very similar to like a mutual fund.
Okay.
So we have all the different sectors of the S&P. And there's the IT sector, there's the oil and gas sector, there's the energy sector is part of that, the healthcare sector. And you basically manage a real portfolio of funds from alumni investors.
Gotcha. You're sort of managing public money. Public investing from the endowment. Okay.
Exactly. So I put my head down for 3 years, and then I finally got the job, and I got back to senior year at Penn State when everybody's, not going all out anymore. And I looked into the startup community, and I brought back that childhood passion of mine. And there was not a student-run venture capital fund or an accelerator at the time. So I just made it my passion project my senior year to build this ecosystem of entrepreneurship where we would help students get jobs in VC or startups and help foster the startup community. And that little project turned into a contagious passion of mine where the easy part was starting it. The hard part was recruiting students that all across different schools, like engineering school, and I would go to like blockchain events and hackathons, and I would just like recruit these students. And then one of the events I went to was this, it was a TED Talk at Penn State.
Okay.
It's about 2,000 student auditorium. I go in there by myself, sit in the back row, and the student walks on stage. And I didn't expect there to be a student. And the student goes on stage and he says, "My name is Nikhil Bhardwaj. I'm a 19-year-old Indian immigrant. I moved here with no friends or family with one life mission to solve climate change without bothering people." And he became our head of technology.
That's quite a statement right there.
Yeah, and I was like,
quite a goal.
I was like, not shoving it down anybody's throat, making it interesting, objective. So we became really good friends, and he joined my little, club. And then fast forward, when I started investment banking, I was always keeping in touch with the engineers and founders in my network on the weekends, talking through some of their ideas. So it was a mix of seeing this, knowing my buddy on the West Coast was working at Schneider Electric, doing EV charging and all this stuff. And I called him up felt like a little kid again. And I'm like, "What's going on? I see there's 500 new models coming out. They're all supposed to be autonomous driving. This is way bigger than just transportation. This is the future of computing, how we connect with, how we do computing different things. It's a revolution. And that's when I did what any practical person would do. I quit my job a couple weeks later. I moved out to California, and I lived on Nikhil, my co-founder's couch for 6 months, and 2 naive founders building Zeal.
And tell me what Zeal is. Like, what did you guys build? What was the mission, and what did you guys create?
Yeah, so the mission is, we put our personal values and mission statement into the company, so that solving climate change without bothering people was our mission going into it. Being a first-time founder, you don't really know what you're doing. So when we first started, we were just a reservation app, helping cars reserve chargers, and they would do it at times when it was cheap for the building and good for the environment. Tried selling that. Lesson learned. You got to have a product, not a feature.
Gotcha. So it was like an open table for chargers kind of thing. If you're
Sure, yeah.
If you're
yeah.
playing Mad Libs here.
Yeah, without making any revenue or having a salary or anything like that. So then, I put on the sales hat, never thought I would do sales in my life. And I'm going out there, I'm talking to these folks, property owners and managers. We sold to commercial real estate and multifamily properties. And they told me they want payments and energy management and access control, being able to get to choose who uses the charger.
Okay.
So like a hotel, like I could take your key away and I could charge you for like the candy at a margin. So we had to build a full like connected system that works like your Uber app, and you can turn it on, turn it off, and pay for your sessions. So we built that, we put it inside the charging station, and we started selling the charger, the software, and we went to market. And super exciting, we got about 12 different properties right away. We're off to the races. I thought we're finally gonna fundraise and maybe have a salary once again. And that's when all hell broke loose. And that was the moment when the app wouldn't connect to the charger wouldn't connect to this cloud, which we found out later, it's not this imaginary thing above our heads, it's a physical server that sits in the middle of the country. And everybody was getting stranded. I was getting death threat emails because I was the customer success email. I hope your CEO dies, I hope your company goes bankrupt, some other things.
You're getting company threats.
I think they thought they were, talking to a robot.
Okay.
But it was like, I hope your CEO dies. Like the company's like, I'm stranded again. So we realized it's not just a social media app or something like that. These are people's lives, and they're depending on us to get around and do their things. So in 2019, 3 things happened. Our back was against the wall. We didn't have any money. COVID happened. So there was this, a little popularity growing with contactless payments. And the second thing that happened was that there was this new concept that instead of sending information to that physical server across the country that we call the cloud, you could send information through devices directly, just like a TV remote.
Okay, yep.
And it was called distributed ledger. Just think of it as just packets of data. So we knew that. And then the third thing that happened was it just became possible to sort of send this through smartphones and smart devices like a charger. So we made it our mission to eliminate the internet, eliminate the cloud, and build a truly self-reliant experience where you go down there, it works 100% of the time, the payments, there's no loss, and a driver's never worrying about their car not working and being stranded again.
Yeah, so you're building chargers, but instead of it ping-pong, each one is independent, right? So it can do it all. It can charge, pay, connect, without having to connect to a server, like you said, somewhere in the middle of the country. It's its own vertically integrated system right there.
Yeah.
And that gives you reliability and precision and all that stuff.
Right. It's like the way I like to think about it, because I'm not technical. The technical knowledge I know is from being around very intelligent people. It's sort of like being a kid, where currently today, when you depend on the cloud, if you ask me a question, I would have to go run back to my mom and dad and say, do you know the answer to this? And then run back and tell you the answer. Sort of like that scene in Good Will Hunting when the guy is just plagiarizing the words of someone else from a textbook, and he's like, do you have any thoughts of your own?
Yeah.
But we call these things smart devices, but they're only smart if they have a connection to their mom and dad across the country. So what we've done is we took that brain across the country, the server, and we put it inside all of the devices, not just one of them, so they could all think, act, and process on their own. So the idea behind it is that, yes, it works in underground garages, but it thrives in places that have good connectivity because it's just faster, more reliable, and it always works.
Do you guys make the units yourself, manufacture them yourself, design them yourself?
So we're asset light. We work with different manufacturers, and we essentially make a custom product with them where we put our computer inside of it, either through a digital computing layer, or we put a physical board that acts like a computer.
Cool. How do you make money?
It's a good question. So we focus on the largest real estate institutions in North America. The reason why we went that path is because when all these EV charging companies were selling to the path of least resistance, where there's subsidies and rebates and places that they're welcome, we said if Zio didn't exist today, what wouldn't exist. And with 40% of Americans living in apartments, we wanted to create that access. So we focused on the real estate market, going to the top owners and operators that own the majority of land. And we sell to them a hardware charging station, which we make a little margin on. And then we have a software subscription that the building manager pays. So they can manage all of this charging sites. They can change the rates. They can make custom access, like the staff might get a discount on charging, while the residents might get this. When someone moves out of the building, they can kick them off so nobody's going back there and using it. So that's the subscription. And then we have a revenue share where think of it as like, they pay $10 for a session, and we'll make a piece of that.
Gotcha. So it's a SaaS model, right? So you can make a little money on the hardware. You get that great, recurring revenue for them to use your software. Right. And then if they're being used, the more they're being used, the more you make because you get a piece of that too.
Exactly. And then the last component, which we sell as a software protocol, is our computing layer. That's the thing that makes it work. So a lot of people have this idea that software runs the world, but it's what runs software. And that's the thing you don't see, the computing layer that allows the functions to work. And because we own that, which is similar to Amazon having Amazon Web Services, that part of the value chain is one that makes us unique, where we're the only ones that have that stack, and we're the only ones, so we sell that to the customer as well.
How many employees do you have?
We're a lean team, about 45 to 50. So we have an ops team, engineering team of about 14 all in-house, and then a sales team, but we're not going door to door. We take a very thoughtful, holistic approach. We have a territory team that they work with our real estate partners, and then we also have a kind of thing like a franchise model where we have channel partners that resell our chargers.
What do you see as obviously you're all in on EV, you're excited about EV. A couple of years ago, there was a huge push even from the manufacturers saying they have all these companies, American, you name it, are going to build electric vehicles. And there's been a big blowback now, and there's a lot of demand has fallen. What do you see right now do you see that as is it hype? Are people being overly negative? What's kind of like right now the snapshot of the
I'm ecstatic.
World? Yeah, obviously you're ecstatic.
No, I'm saying because, back in 2019, 2020, there was no press. It was all, and the press that came out, it was just from the clean tech industry. So how are you going to get someone from outside the industry without an objective source and get them to come in for different reasons? I like to think of it as like politics. When it's not an exciting topic unless there's two sides of it. So I think it's great for the industry, but the reality is the EV industry has more EVs selling than they've ever had before. And last year alone in 2023, there was 1.6 million EVs sold. Fast forward it took 10 years to sell the first million EVs in the US. So when you think about that, it took 10 years, and then it took 2 years for the first million, and then it took 1 year for 1.5 last year, and we're still ramping up with all these new models we haven't had before, with the Hyundai Ioniq, which is the cheapest lease in America now, beyond gas cars. It's just kind of nonsense.
What are you focused on? What is the company aiming for in the next year?
Yeah, so we're very grateful for our investors and what it allows us to accomplish. The real things that we're excited about is our partnerships. We have this white glove approach with some of our biggest real estate leaders, and these aren't just groups, checking the ESG box. Like, these are groups that they want to be bold, they want to be a pioneer, and they realize that they are the people that have the keys to accelerating the future. So we believe the rate of the future is not decided by an expert opinion. It's decided by the people that have the market and will feed into the technology that's going to accelerate it. So for us, next year, in the next 18 months, we're looking to expand our real estate partner community. We're looking to expand our channel partners. These are the ones that they're experts in electrical and lighting, and now they're reselling Zio as their top EV charging choice. And then in the background, on the technology side, we have some really exciting things going on. We're leveraging our core technology, the self-reliant protocol that allows you to do internet-free payments and all that fun stuff. We're going to be working with one of the largest manufacturers to embed it inside their chargers. And then outside that, we have another exciting pilot, which I can't talk too much about, but we're licensing our payment to a completely different vertical. And that's kind of the future of our technology, where EV charging is our first application. We want to accelerate that future, But beyond that, we see any shared smart device, whether that's payment terminals, smart access control, turning it on through the phone, even like Uber, DoorDash. You don't have to you get beer delivered to your home. You don't need to show your license and wait for to load. It just does it right away. And our goal is to accelerate that self-sufficient smart city where it just uncaps the possibility for smart cities to grow anywhere, regardless of the resources they have.
Outside of charging, what are you excited about in the EV world right now? Everyone's hearing about the next couple of years. I will never buy an EV. I'm always leasing one because, like I said, it's you're buying a very expensive computer, and the technology. I feel like it's like you're buying the last tube TV before the flat screens come out.
Yeah, there you go.
I feel like in the next couple of years, there's going to be a huge explosion of technology. Maybe it's crazy fast charging on the car. Maybe it's extreme, range and that sort of stuff. What are you what's happening right now that you're excited about? And I know there's a lot of rumors, but again, this is not about your company. This is about the
No.
What's going to blow our minds in the next 2 years?
So I think first, the market. When I was reading all those little articles and getting excited about the EV race, what blew my mind wasn't the U.S. manufacturers. It was that this was already happening on a global scale. The Hyundai, the Kias, the
China with
Mercedes, BMW, 15% of their car sales globally. In the U.S. as well is electric. They're better selling. People are liking these things, so they're flooding the U.S. markets. And while it's great for the U.S.-based manufacturers to be scaling as well, it's going to happen regardless. Mm-hmm. So when I look at this market, I sort of think of it as the first BlackBerry. Right, and it's the naysayers, skeptics, or what do I need to send emails on my phone for? That's just inefficient. Mm-hmm. Or when the first iPhone came out, right? Everybody, there was long lines and people were excited, but the other side, the laggards, were like, "What is this app store? What, am I going to play video games my whole life?" They didn't think about the unlimited applications from Uber to DoorDash to Robinhood.
So when's this big adoption going to happen? When's the iPhone moment going to happen?
So I'm saying imagine that unlimited possibility is how I see electric vehicles. Mm-hmm. They're going to be self-driving. They're going to be, you don't even need to drive. It will park itself. They will be able to, you can even have it go out and do almost like ride sharing and picking people up and then making money on the side. Then it's a resource, not just for that aspect, it's a resource for transferring communications. We view telecom as all these different physical towers that communicate. Well, these are all distributed mobile servers where they're now able to communicate in a distributed fashion, which just leverages the resources in the world instead of just depleting it. And then beyond that, there's just really, really cool things on the energy side where the vehicle itself, when you use a portable iPhone charger, it basically gives you energy, discharges energy from that stored thing. And that comes in handy when there's not an outlet nearby.
I have one in my backpack right now.
There you go. So the idea of electric vehicles not being a strain on the grid or utilities, but they'll actually be an asset where if you're plugging in overnight and you already have the full tank, you can now discharge that back to the grid or other vehicles, your neighbor and things like that. And you build this kind of a distributed marketplace where we're actually able to do more without adding physical, larger resources, but just optimizing the system entirely.
That's bold predictions, my man. I like it. Xander Isaacson, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.